been some time now when we met. I think I met the DBA people about a month or so. But the PhD people, it's been very long. But you see more of me. If you have the sheet that we've given you, the first one, KSB Summer Research Camp. This is the brainchild of the dean to organize this workshop for both PhD, DBA students, and faculty members as well. So all of us are going to be here with you for both faculty members and the doctoral students to interact. The idea is to develop ourselves for a better Ghana in the field of research. That's where we make our contribution. So I wouldn't bother you with reading through all this. You have copies with you, so you can go through what this research is all about. We have program of activity, the other sheet that you have with you. Yesterday we had special session with one of the resource persons, Jim Walsh. Jim Walsh is a former editor, chief editor for Academy of Management Journal. Academy of Management Journal is a journal, the top journal in the field of management research. In fact, the acceptance rate of that journal is less than 1%, right? It's less than 3%. It means that if they receive 100 articles, they accept only 3 out of 100. So you can imagine. It is very, very tough journal, and it's difficult to get inside. If you don't belong to that club, you need to find a way of getting there, probably through partnership, collaboration with those who have the experience. But fortunately, we have managed to get such a person to be here with us. It is very, very difficult to get him. And when he came, I looked at him and I said, in fact, I didn't believe that you would come. And he was just laughing because it's difficult to get such a person. When they organize their annual research conference, every year they receive about 10,000 applications throughout the world. That's the accepted ones. Those who qualify to attend the conference, every year they receive over 10,000 people attending Academy of Management conference. So you can imagine. And all these 10,000 people, only 3% will be accepted for publication. It tells you how difficult it is to get published in that journal. So if you have such a person with us, it is a blessing. So let us take the best out of them. Apart from him, we also have Professor Moses Akwa. You remember him, the DBA student. He was here with you. He's back with Jim Walsh. They are very good friends. And then we also have Professor Andor Bedu Francis, also here with us. And then also, he's from University of Texas. And then we have our dean here with us. He's also a renowned academic. He's been in several countries to assist them in their research quest. So they are all here with us, and we must take advantage of their presence here. So if you look at this sheet, apart from our meeting, faculty meeting with Jim, today being the opening session, our dean will give a brief address, and then we start with setting the paper hook. That's positioning the significance of the contribution. So we have been talking about publishing. How do we start? Why do you want to publish? And among all issues in Ghana, why do you say that I want to focus on entrepreneurship? What problem have you found about SMEs in Ghana? that necessitate your interest to conduct a research in that area. So they will be talking about some of these issues, and they will engage all of us to make contributions. We understand our environment better than them. So let us contribute for them to know that we understand what we want to do. So Jim Walsh will be talking about that, and that will be supported by Professor Moses Akwa and Professor Andobedu. And there will be discussion session for all of us to contribute. So that will be the first session. After that, we have our snack break. And when we come back, we will look at the theoretical side, theoretical framing and hypothesis. Every research is informed by a theory. How do you integrate the theory in the work that you are doing? So they will be talking about those issues as well. So that will be enough for the day, and we hope that by 2 o'clock, we will close and have our lunch. And the school has been charitable enough to provide us with a lunch, so we will have our lunch, and then we will close for the day. And then tomorrow, we continue at exactly 9 o'clock. We have tips for being a prolific scholar. Everybody wants to be a scholar here. The moment you make up your mind to do your PhD, it means that you want to be a scholar, and not just a Ghanaian scholar. You want to be a scholar who can be recognized anywhere in the world. Okay, so how do we become a scholar? They will talk about it. So again, Jim will be taking that. In fact, Jim will be leaving tomorrow after the morning session. He will leave us, so he will handle the morning session. After that, we take him to the airport and say goodbye to him. But we are hoping that he will come back and spend more time with us. And then after that, we will have writing a concise discussion that will be facilitated by Professor Moses Akwa, Professor Andobedu, and Professor Nathaniel Bosu. Then we will have the art of clear writing to be facilitated by the same people. Then the method sessions, imperatives, that will be facilitated by Professor Nathaniel Bosu and Dr. Godfred Awa. So that will be the last session for tomorrow. And on Friday, 21st June, we have Building International Research Career. Again, that will be facilitated by Professor Moses Akwa and Professor Andobedu. Then Research Mentoring and Collaboration to be facilitated by Professor Moses Akwa, Professor Andobedu, and Professor Nathaniel Bosu. Then we have Securing Research Grant. That will be facilitated by Professor Nathaniel Bosu. And then we have the closing remarks on Friday. Friday, hopefully, we hope to close by 3 o'clock so that those who want to go back can get to their destinations on time. So on that note, I will invite Professor Nathaniel Bosu, the Dean of Business School, to give us the opening address. Thank you very much.
Once again, good morning, and welcome to you all to this workshop. As I was saying earlier, this workshop is supposed to be interactive, where you, I would say, you aspiring scholars, will be engaged with our experienced professors and scholars here. I call them scholars because of the great work they have done. All right? Great work because their work have been published in one of the best journals. And we have someone like Professor Walsh here being a former chief editor of Academy of Management Journal. It's the aspiration of many of us to publish in such a journal. But it's not easy to get there. But again, we need to be prepared to learn from people like that. All right? And so, as we gather here today, I will appeal to each one of us to be humble, right? I mean that word very well. We need to be humble because for research, if you lack humility and patience, you're not going to get anywhere. So you may have an idea that you may be passionate about, but be prepared to hear someone say it is a garbage work. And then begin to rethink how you can turn your garbage into something useful. All right? And also be prepared to say someone telling you that is a rubbish work. So I'm telling you all these words because these are words you hear when you want to become a scholar. And it is through this process of hearing these discouraging words and reorienting yourself to accept the fact that excellence comes from several moments of failure and despair. It has happened to all of us before. And if I want to share my own experience with you, my first publication after PhD, so you are just trying, after PhD, my first submission to International Business Review, the first sentence from a reviewer was that, why should anybody even care about reading this? A work that is coming from a PhD. Why should anybody even care about reading this? So he actually did not read beyond the introduction. You get my point? But I was shattered. I didn't cry, but it was not something easy to take. Probably because I did not get to accept the fact that before you can become a scholar, you need to go through the mill. So eventually, when that paper got published 2 years later, I could see the difference between what was published and what I submitted. Do you get my point? So please, as we engage these scholars here, let's accept that proposition that to become a scholar, which we want here, it's not an easy job. It's a process of humility, patience, and, say, apprenticeship. All right? So I don't want to take too much of your time, and I would like you to welcome these guys up here so that we can begin to have a conversation. So here we have Professor Jim Walsh from University of Michigan. We have Professor Moses Aqua from University of North Carolina, right? And Professor Andobedu from University of Texas in where? Rio Grande Valley. Okay. All right. So they will be taking you through the process today. And as I said at the beginning before they came, they are pro-Americans, right? So be prepared for them to hear them telling you things as it is. I know Ghana culture, we tend to be British, right? Tend to be nice, whilst in fact we are not nice. But Americans will tell you exactly how they feel. So, and I prefer that. So as they join us, let's get ready for their insight and inspiration for the day. Okay? We had a session with Jim Walsh, and it was very insightful on the challenges of publishing in leading journals. Some of our academic staff were there yesterday, right? So we proposed that this morning we allow the doctoral candidate to experience that presentation. So lecturers, if you want to stay, you are welcome to stay. But if you want to leave for any other work, you are welcome. So that after lunch break, the snack break, then you can come back. The two of you. Okay. All right. So that means that you will be missing the lecturers in another room. Okay. That also works fine. So Jim will be presenting. Yes. Okay. 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 That's fine. So how many lecturers do we have here? Okay. So we will get you a room so that you can. Free, but you are a doctoral student. No. You stay here. You were there yesterday. Okay, that's fine. You were also there yesterday. Okay, those of you who were here yesterday, you are free to go to the other room.
What we thought was is that there are people that didn't hear what I had to say.
Excuse me, is this being recorded? Is it being recorded so that we can listen to it again and again when we? Okay.
So one more thing. If Jim is talking, you are free to raise your hand to interrupt. Okay? Come on, seriously. You don't sit down passive. If he's saying something that you think you need a clarification right there, he's happy for you to put up your hand and then switch on your mic and ask a question. The only thing we wouldn't prefer is any kind of uncontrolled interruption. So if you want to ask him a question, you want to stop him to explain something, the best idea is to put up your hand. And he is happy to stop and allow you to ask a question. Yeah.
Find out, before he comes, you made a statement that some publications are garbage work.
Yes.
I wanted to find out from you, what constitutes garbage work? Or what are the characteristics of garbage work?
Why not? I think the best response would be to allow him to give a presentation, and then you will see the answer. Yeah. But essentially, if people use the word garbage, that means that they don't see the work you are doing to be important. As simple as that. So, in other words, why are you wasting your time on this? Like they told me in my first publication. Why waste your time? You find your the guy even said, why not spend your time to do something more important? But it doesn't mean that the work itself is a garbage. It's simply because of the way I presented it. Do you get my point there? Because remember, the same reviewers, the same editors eventually accepted the paper. Right? But it's just at the beginning, it was a garbage. They couldn't see the contribution from it. They couldn't see why I should waste 3 years of my life on that. You get my point? And that's exactly why I brought Jim here. Because he spends over 30 years of his life on this thing. All right? As an editor for many years of what the topmost journal in the world. Academic Management Journal is the highest ranked journal in management and business and management. So for somebody like that, he can answer your question best. Okay? And as I said, be confident to ask him question where you feel like asking. Just that, no emotions, no screaming, no. All right? It's a learning process, so don't be scared about it. We all went through the same thing. And so you want to be an academic who can go anywhere in this world to talk. Be ready for that. Okay? So I hand you to Jim now.
Can you hear me if I just talk like this? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, there it is.
Hello.
Hello, testing. Is this okay? All right. I thought I could be heard otherwise, but is this is the same? It's, is this the same? It's better? Is it really better? All right. I feel like I'm going to Mars or something. I've done this for 35 years. I've never done this in my whole life. So this is don't take a picture of me. That's all I ask. No, but as I think back, when I see it when I'm in companies talking to people, or when I talk to students, or I talk to doctoral students, the one thing that strikes me, for better or worse, is that I just think differently from the people I encounter. The stuff that comes out of my mouth is just different from the words that come out of the mouth of people that are managers in companies or students or young doctoral students. And what you develop is a quality of mind as a professor where you think very carefully about issues. and your logic is clear, and you're very attuned to boundary conditions. You don't overreach. You're very attuned to unintended consequences of something. And there's just a clarity of thought on your best day when you've had good sleep and all of that. There's a clarity of thought and rigor that you have. So that's one thing you have as a professor. And then the other thing you have, and I'll just assert this, at least any professor I know that's any good at this, is deeply curious about the world. So they're just very, very curious, and they can think straight. And then there's a third piece is, again, if you're in the right profession, they're excited about what they're doing. They like teaching, they like to do research, they like to actually serve their community, those are the three big aspects of what it means to be a professor, and I think that's true anywhere in the world. And it sort of resonates with who they are as a person, and they love that. So then when you encounter students of any sort, of doctoral students, master's students, undergraduate students, you're in business and settings of any kind, what you bring to the table is a curiosity and an enthusiasm, and you can think straight, and that's a pretty powerful combination. And then, is the dean gone? No, he's here. Okay, well, if he's not here, pretend he's not here. I was hoping you weren't going to be here. No, but even in terms of writing articles, I've written articles, and these articles have been cited a good deal and all of that. But at the end of the day, I think it's the ability to just think clearly and then communicate that excitement to anybody you encounter, and then maybe you will find a beta coefficient that matters and changes the world. But in general, what you're doing is just passing on everything you know to the next group of people, and then maybe they'll find a beta coefficient that changes the world. But it's that curiosity, excitement, and ability to think clearly and straight is what you have. And as you write papers, again, this is just after doing this for 35 years, the process of being told, why should I read your dissertation? This is a piece of junk. And then you learn how to think clearer. The process of doing research actually teaches you how to think clearly. You can't get away with sloppy thinking. You just can't. You'll get annihilated in the review process. And so when we come in here and say, okay, it's thinking and writing for publication, it's fundamentally, it's right at the heart of who are you as a human being. What is the nature of your curiosity? How enthusiastic are you and committed are you to doing this work? And then can you think straight? So what I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about who we are as human beings and try to encourage you. It's so hard because there's so many people. I've done this long enough to know that if I call on someone and say, tell me the story of your life, it's not going to go well in a room full of 50 people and all of that. But I'm going to encourage you to talk to each other about some things that really matter. And then I want to tell you tricks and tips and inside look at what goes on in the journal publication process. Having done this for 35 years, and I've been fortunate enough, and I consider it to be completely good fortune. I've spent now 20 years, or maybe 21 years, as an editor of one kind or another of a number of very big journals in our field. So I've seen the backstage of what it takes to publish, and as well as I've been able to publish some papers myself. But especially in my editorial role, I've just seen an awful lot, like hundreds and hundreds of papers, and watching them get accepted and rejected along the way. So I want to pass on some of that knowledge to you as I can. And then I was fiddling with the computer back there, and I heard Nathaniel say, please engage me, interrupt me. I think you've encountered enough Americans to know that we're pretty casual people, and the last thing I want to do is be treated like Herr Doctor Professor, and and people just I don't know, just respect me and leave me alone. I'd much rather engage you as I can. So with that as backdrop. What do I do with this thing? I'll tell you a little bit about me, and then try to get some. Oh, do we have those sheets of paper again? Can I do the same thing? Oh, that'd be great. Okay, and I'm going to collect a little bit of information from you, and I'll tell you in a second what that is, and it will allow us to keep in touch as well. I just want to tell you where I'm from. You could say where I'm from, the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan. But if Ann Arbor doesn't mean anything to anybody outside. If you're outside the U.S., you know where Los Angeles is and where New York is, maybe, and then that's that. But I'm right there under that dot. It's near the lakes, and I was talking to someone the other day, saying come to America and all that. And if you come to America for the first time, people don't go to Ann Arbor, Michigan. They go to the Grand Canyon or New York or Hollywood or something like that. It's a very nice place, but that's where I'm from, so it's kind of far away. I got a question for you. I got to Google last night, and this is the Google ad. This is the Senegal flag, I guess. Just as a cultural moment, what's going on here? On the right, they're upset. On the left, they're happy. And then there's people in the bus that are happy. Can someone explain why this is the cover page on Google with the Senegal flag? And I mean, Senegal won their soccer game. Why are the people on the right upset? Does that make any sense? Maybe it's not big enough to. And there's someone with like a death mask or something on the right. I don't know. It was a cultural moment. I had no idea what I was looking at. At first I saw the colors and I said, this is the Ghana flag. I go, no, that's not the Ghana flag. If someone has the answer to this question, this is my curiosity. What's going on here? But anyway, there's that. I am going to give you, and I have given to Nathaniel, a packet of these readings, and it's a little bit too big to squeeze through the internet tube. It's 47 pages. And this is I know you come from many different fields, and I'm a management and strategy person. And this is, a big journal, empirical journal, and it's the Academy of Management Journal. And 5 or 6 years ago, they came out with a series of small 3 and 4 page essays. Each one of these is only 3 or 4 pages about those very topics. And these topics kind of follow the topics for this workshop, actually. And so I put all of those into one big PDF and gave it to Nathaniel, and then he'll get it to you somehow. So I want you to have that these are just tips from scholars in the field talking about how do you pick a topic, essentials of research design, et cetera. And as is true from so many things like this, it tells you everything and tells you nothing at the same time. They're all abstract comments on the process, but it's useful. And I'll talk a little bit at the end about publishing in the global journals if not a U.S. author. And embedded in that are ideas that people talk about the hegemony of America, North American models of scholarship, and there's, I suppose, something to that. And so there are tips that people, there are many, many people from outside the U.S. publish in these journals, but you have to learn how to do that in some way. So there's one of them speaks to that, and we'll review that in some detail. I will also give you a copy of this presentation. Again, it's too big to squeeze through the internet to get in. I didn't know who you were beforehand. When you see this, this maybe is a classic American move. I have who I am as a paper person, and then this is the formal biography. If you ever have to, like in my world, you have to give a formal biography for things. And so this is everything I've done in the last 35 years in 4 little paragraphs. So that's, so there's that, fine. If I share this with students, I always say, all you need to know is I'm really smart. Just stupid stuff like that. But there's that. But in reality, I'm a person like anybody else too. And so I have a family. I have 3 daughters, and there they are on the left. And this is not. This should be bigger. I've loved motorcycles all my life, and so when my last daughter graduated from college, I took we have to pay tuition for our kids. It's pretty sizable in the U.S. So I took one more tuition check and bought a nice motorcycle. All my life I wanted a nice motorcycle, but I spent all my money on my kids. So I bought that motorcycle, and I'd like to ride that around. My sports, I like to ski, downhill ski, but that doesn't do much in the equator. And I've been a runner all my life, although now I ran this morning, but I'm not what I used to be. And I do most of my work in coffee shops. I try not to work in the office. I like white noise, and I'm a people person, so I sit in coffee shops all day long. So that's the essence of me. I'd like to know something about you. And again, I know this is hard in this kind of a setting, but we just passed out this sheet of paper. This is a way I'm going to collect some data about you, And I'm going to feed this back to you. I'm going to content analyze the results and then feed it back, but I'm not going to do that today, of course. So I'd love to have, if you'd be willing to share your name, your email address, and then do this print clearly, because if I can't read it, then you're not getting it. And then I'd love to know just very broadly what's your field, and is there some your topic of research or your aspirations for research, because I know there are people in the room from accounting and marketing and strategy and all of that. And then what I'm really interested in, and this will take a few minutes, is to think through and say, who is the teacher that made the biggest difference in your life? And if there's three, pick one. And then name that person. And it's important for you to just put a name down and then reflect and say, what made him or her so special? A couple, three attributes. You don't have to write a lot of prose. It could be bullet points. But I'm really curious as to what are the attributes of that teacher that was so important to you in your life. And then down underneath that, why do you want to be a scholar? And a scholar is teaching and service and research. So if you would, if you'd fill that out, that'd be great. As I say, I will content analyze this, and I'll have your email addresses, and I'll send it all back to you, and then with some comments when I get back to the U.S. Can I have one as well? Thanks.
Excuse me. Excuse me, Prof. Because I wanted to find out, with your question, who is the teacher that made the biggest difference in your life? To be honest with you, I can't remember any teacher, but I can remember a professor who I worked with
Okay.
when I was first appointed.
Somebody that mattered to you. Yeah, it really mattered. Okay, I'll just give you another minute or two, and then you can keep writing as we go if we want. But I just wanted to give you a moment to think quietly before we went on. it looks like about half are done and half are not. Can we go another 87 seconds? 87 seconds, and then we'll start. Okay. I'm just curious to get a sense of what you wrote down. I guess, are all these mics live? If you just push a button, you can just, I just like to just get, can people just talk through what are the attributes of that important teacher in your life? Just share. What do you got? Just one attribute. Yeah. And what made him so special? Yeah, but why? Yeah, but why? He's your mentor. But what did he do that made him so special?
He had a lot of patience, and he was more like a father to me.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that's important. So it's like a patience with a father. Attributes.
At the graduate level, and honestly, there was an issue in a class one day, and I unconsciously made a comment. He brought up certain information, and I thought that those informations were old issues in terms of development. He was comparing Japan to US then. So unconsciously, I said that his materials were archaic. You know, and in fact, the class, everybody was looking at me like a victim. And then, in fact, I didn't even say it was archaic. In fact, I said it was stupid. So he said, when they were looking at me and then they want to see how he will react. And then he said, no, don't insult me. He was telling the class. I said the materials are stupid, not him. You see, so it's his material I am talking about, not himself. So if they are looking at him, they are rather insulting him. But I know deep down he wasn't happy with that comment. So after 2 occasions, we have not seen him in class. And when he came back, he said, well, he should have allowed me to explain myself what I meant by that comment. Mm-hmm. And he did not do that. But when he went and checked, he saw that it was true that at this current point, we don't compare Japan to America again. It should have been China and America in terms of development. And so he said that, oh, I'm rather a bad teacher because I should have known your level and before I come into it. But after my first degree, he called me, he sat me down, he counseled me, and then he asked me to study further. And since then, anywhere I go, he's my referee, even in employment, even in this program, he's my referee.
That's fantastic.
My master's degree like that. And
so
he always
he honored you, basically. He honored your intelligence and commitments and basically said he was wrong, too. So he had some humility. We talked about humility. He had humility to say, I don't know everything. That's important.
Okay, so I've had encounter with a lot of teachers, and they all have their something special about them. But there's one particular teacher I encountered that actually changed my life about how I think about the world and everything. I want to say something small about him. He believes in everyone and every effort you make, right? So he was the first person to recognize that there's something in me and I could do
Yeah.
something better in this life.
Yeah, that's great. That's what happened to me. Somebody saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and he reflected it back.
A female teacher in my middle school, and she inspires. She
Mike,
she really inspired me. She obviously saw something in me and said, "You could climb up to." And you know, interestingly, she gave me a test with the sun, apparently to compare. I didn't know that she was trying to compare, but she brought the son who was in another school and gave us a test. And I was able to do better than the son, and she was very happy. You know, although I was in a government institution, the son was in private
Yeah.
school. She was very much okay, and she asked me to write common entrance the next year to come to secondary school.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And then if my eyesight is pretty good, but if I'm not mistaken, you have some gray in your beard, right?
I do, yes, I do, yes.
So notice how cool that is. The most important teacher from a man with a gray beard is someone from middle school that he's carrying with him. That the impact you can have on a person is incredible. It's not someone he met yesterday. It's someone he met when he was 12 years old, and it's still there. I mean, that makes you your arms tingle. It's really cool that you have that kind of power and influence in people.
I'd say that the person who made the most influence on me is my secondary school teacher also, my accounting teacher. Because when I chose accounting, I kind of chose it because everyone was choosing science, and I kind of wanted to rebel. So I chose accounting. But every time he would come to class, he was so excited about the numbers and the accounts and the formats, and at times he would even, make it into songs and dance, and he kind of made it so exciting that it was at the point I decided it's accounting or nothing.
Wow.
And I think that was pretty powerful for me.
Yeah, that's that enthusiasm I was talking about. It's contagious. Yeah. If it's your life and you don't care about it, why should anybody else care about it? And that we'll actually get to that when we start talking about topic choices. Everything is interesting so long as you think it's interesting and you can tell other people it's interesting, you're off and running. And then when you go to write those papers, and you don't get reviewers saying, "Why do I care about this?" Because your enthusiasm will come through, just like that accounting professor's enthusiasm will come through. Anybody else have anything to say about an impactful teacher that's perhaps a little different? Yeah.
Yeah, I have one Mr. Basie, Michael Basie, at the undergrad level. Anytime he comes to class, he will check whether what we did the previous time, at least we have some understanding about it. And then he also ensure that he appreciates every contribution. Actually, he always say that there's always a good question, but also there's no stupid question,
Right.
but always a foolish answer.
Yeah.
You use that mean that all that we ask, he's ready to tolerate that. And he also checks that there's feedback after everything he says.
Yeah.
You have it before he moves on. So we appreciated that, and it really helped us,
Yeah. Boy, so it's a whole gamut. There's people respect you, they see you, they're enthusiastic, they have and we know that's true. I want to put that out just for starters, even as before we talk about scholars, is a backdrop. We should all strive to be that teacher in somebody else's life, and you can't touch every single person, but if you come in with that kind of mentality, you can change the world. So there's that. And as we get at the end, I'll talk about it. At some level, I think our work is sacred. I can be so exalted. Important to remind ourselves of what's possible, because we get into the day-to-day life, and you've got all the pressures and all the reward systems and all the incentives and all that goes on and on and on. And you can forget what it is we're doing here. So I just want to start with that. Just real quick, we'll do this in like round robin fashion or something, just as to why you want to be a scholar. I'm just really interested. So just short answers, go. Why do you want to be a scholar? Fantastic. Yeah. So to contribute to knowledge and theory, and then to contribute to the society.
Yeah, I think that I also want to be a scholar because I want to gain more insight into the work that others have done.
Mm-hmm.
Then through that, I'll make my own contribution to knowledge.
Yeah.
And then also be able to contribute to policy and then the solution of practical problems in my field of practice.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So the joy of discovery and then contribute to practice.
Yeah, mine too is to get better understanding of what people have been coming out with and also contribute to knowledge.
Yeah, yeah. Understanding, knowledge.
I also realized there are litany of challenges faced by the developing countries, Africa, especially in Ghana, and we need practical solutions to address them. And in so doing, I need to acquire a lot of knowledge to be able to understand and appreciate those issues myself so that I'll be able to come out with solutions that will help address those various challenges facing the continent so that at least if we not catch up with the West, we should be able to get close to the West. And stop our guys from dying on the high seas and the rest.
Yeah, yeah. So they can ground it, serve Africa.
Yeah, it seems the question is, why are you a scholar?
Yeah.
But not, why do you want to be a scholar?
I'm just assuming you're already a scholar. It's in your DNA.
So in this case, if you ask why are you a scholar, then maybe I would say that because I've contributed to knowledge, so I'm a scholar.
Yeah.
But if you say why do you want to be a scholar, then maybe I'll say, okay, I also want to improve my level of education in order to impart and also being able to do research to solve problems.
Yeah.
So I had a problem with the question based on the answering.
Sure. Although I'll make a comment on that. I went for a run this morning with my two friends, and we were talking about status. And you have lecturer and senior lecturer and associate professor and full professor. And then they were saying there's a difference if you're a professor than a doctor and all this. And okay, I get that. But what's interesting about this line of work is it's the same job. And even once you're a doctoral student, you're kind of in, because as a doctoral student you'll teach, as a doctoral student you're thinking, as a doctoral student you're doing research, as a lecturer you're thinking, you're teaching, you're doing research, as a professor you're teaching, you're doing research. It's the same thing all the way through. So why are you a scholar? You're already in. So it's it. You're here. You're not out selling insurance this morning. You're sitting right here. So there's degrees and the contributions change, but it's actually the same job for the rest of your life. This is what it is. So we're in. You're in the club. Okay. I'll stop there. I'll show you a slide. I asked this question of people at 3 different career stages through the Academy of Management, because I've had a fair bit of attachment to that organization. And the answers that came out of that survey, I'll just foreshadow, are exactly the same as what you said. I content analyze the response. I'll do that with yours too. I'll content analyze them and see what they are, and I'll create a little histogram or something. Because I asked the lecturers yesterday about that too, and I'll put them together. But the 2 big ones were the life of the mind, the joy of discovery to knowledge, just, that we're thinking thinkers, and then making a better world. Those were the 2. And then it was something about, he pays some money and it's, I like the life of a professor and all that. But the 2 big ones were the life of the mind and make a better world. So you've got those 2 orientations, and then these teachers that encounter people, affirm with humility and engage. So at the individual level, you're going to touch individual lives, and then you're trying to change society, and you're doing it by honoring your own gifts. This is a pretty gosh darn great profession. So then the question is, all right, how do we do all this? Maybe this is a long start, but I just want to get this on the table because there are so many pressures on us now to perform, and there are so many different control systems that are in place. And we can somehow, well, for those of you that are psychologists, extrinsic motivation can actually wipe out intrinsic motivation. And that's a finding that's out there. And so if you put all these heavy extrinsic rewards on what we're doing, you start running around trying to chase those extrinsic rewards, and you forget why you actually want to be a professor, which is the life of the mind and to change the world. That's why you're a professor. You're not a professor to get a number of articles in the following journals so that you can get, you're not making bricks here, So I just want to have that as the backdrop, because everything I'll say speaks against that as the orientation, is we're trying to cultivate our minds in service of the world. Maybe I'll go through this really quickly. I did this yesterday. I think we'll go on to other things. But if you could find a way to do this among yourselves, I think this would be useful. I am the director of our doctoral program in my department back home. And with our brand new doctoral students, when they're on campus for the first month, we sit in a small groups, and then we actually tell each other the story of our lives. And basically saying, that leads you to say, why am I sitting here today as a scholar? What am I doing here? I'm not a bricklayer, I'm not selling insurance, I'm not a racer, or whatever it is. I'm doing this. And we tell the story of our lives, and then sometimes it's me alone, or sometimes it's another professor and I. And we actually tell real stories about ourselves. Like in my case, my father died when I was a kid, and that really rocked my world, of course, and that has implications for what kind of person I turned into and all that. And we'll speak the truth to each other, and then people will also speak the truth about their own lives. And then it also creates, by the way, the secondary effect is it creates a culture where you start leveling the distance between a student and the professor. We're all in this together because we are all scholars. And then it starts to create a community where we see each other, just like we're saying, those teachers that were so important to you saw you as a human being, saw gifts in you. We don't play these games of the high status and low status and, go get me coffee or something, and then maybe someday I'll talk to you, or buy me a coat and I'll serve on your dissertation committee or some stupid thing. You've heard all of that. And so we have those conversations that are real. So we do that, we tell a story, and then we'll end by saying, well, what kind of work do you want to do when you're cultivating the mind and you're trying to affect, the world? And they talk about that a bit. And then we send them off for about 3 weeks. And this is pretty important. And here, in terms of experimental design, I'm going to tell you what we're doing. If I was here longer and you were my students, I wouldn't tell you what I'm doing. You do it, and then you discover why you did it later. But we don't have much time, so I'll tell you. So we find out what their interests are, and then say, okay, these are the 5, air quotes, top journals in your field, and cultivated to your particular interest. So I'm a management and strategy person, but you can be a management and strategy person based in psychology, and there are journals that do that, which are different than the ones based in economics, which are different yet again from the ones based in sociology. So you identify the ones that are closest to who you are, and you could do this in any other field, and then say, go look at every paper that's been published in those journals in the last 5 years. And then you can do that online, and we want you to look at the abstract, see what resonates. And so what's happening there is they are actually seeing every paper that's been published in the field in the last 5 years in the top journal. So there's an educational piece there. They get a sense of what's going on in the field. But then the challenge is come back in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. It takes a while to do this, and they have other things they're doing. And show up with the 5 articles that you wish you had written. Bring in 5 articles, the PDFs of the ones you could imagine. You say, I would have loved to have written that article. That is really cool. And we said they do that. Then they come to that session, and then what we say to them is, okay, talk about the relationship between the story of your life that you told last month and these articles. And 99 times out of 100, there's a direct connection between the story of their lives and what they're interested in. There's some connection. And they find that's an interesting insight of, whoa, I'm studying something that means something to me at some level. So you have that. And then as the professor, you also, for someone like me who's been doing this for a while, I can look at that and I can see what kind of questions they're asking. I can look at the dependent variables, the independent variables. I can look at the mechanisms, the theoretical orientations. I can look at what kind of methodology they were interested in. I can look at what journals they publish, with the community of scholars, or all of that stuff is, if you know the world, you can see that. And so I get a sense of who they are and where they're going, and I can share that with them in time as they go. But it's really helpful for people to help realize that what they're doing matters them, because it's the life of their mind and they're trying to change the world in some sense. And then they'll see what that work is, and then they have inclinations toward one kind of method or one kind of question over another. And it calms them down. It situates them into the world a little bit and say, oh, maybe this is the kind of person I am. It doesn't close it forever on some other work, but it's very helpful in the first month or two in a program to say, oh, because there's this giant world out there, and what am I going to do, and where could I possibly make a difference? And then they realize, oh, maybe these are my people. Maybe these are my people. And then we go in. So I'd recommend, if you have time, do something like that, and then talk to each other. Maybe the professors here don't want to do that, or they're busy, or you need a cultural intervention. But you could do that among each other. Just tell each other the story of your life. Go find the journals and tell each other why you're interested in them. Listen to each other back, and you're better for it. It's a really good thing. Was somebody going to say something up there? I can't. Okay. And I have the story of my life here, but in the interest of time, I won't bother with this. But I can draw a direct line from my youth, how I grew up, what my values are, and then what kinds of questions I do. And that's my latest paper. That's my mother and father and me in the center there. These are things that matter to me, my capabilities, my career choices. And then you get down to this. So when you figure out what you're doing, when I got to be the elected president of the Academy of Management, one thing you get to do all on your own is set the theme for that annual conference. And 10,000 people go to a city, and then you get to decide what the profession needs to think about. So when I got to do this, my theme, that was the cover of the program, was the questions we asked. And you can read those words, and that's what I wrote in 2008, I think so it's now 10 years ago. But at the end, it's just because a question is yet to be asked or answered does not mean that we need to address it. Some questions are more important than others. So that's that old line of, I remember there was one person I know when he went off to college, his father said to him, don't kill yourself just because you can. Don't drink and smoke too much pot and ruin your life. And it's the same thing, is you can ask a million questions, and then the sense is, well, what question are you going to ask, and how do you find that? And then the comment about Africa matters. One would be to look out at the world and say, what needs to be done? What needs to be done in Ghana? What needs to be done in sub-Saharan Africa? What needs in Africa, in the world, for all humanity? For all humanity, by the way, one thing that's on my mind, I just came from the meeting this weekend where this came into play again up in France, of all places. Do you know what the consensus probability is of human extinction by the end of the century? Extinction of the species. You know what the odds are right now? Have you followed this? Forget Africa and sub-Saharan Africa, just the whole species, human beings, the odds of being extinct in 80 years, fully extinct. Can you guess what the odds are? This is the consensus expert. It's 1 in 5. 1 in 5 chance of human extinction in the next 80 years with what's going on. So if you're looking at problems in the world, there are people worrying about this, and there's a center at Oxford and there's a center at Cambridge, are the ones I know about, and it's called existential risk. And there are centers for, not for, you can't be center for existential risk, or about existential risk. But there's that out there that, that's and the fancy term is we've entered the Anthropocene, that in, the Holocene and then and all of that. And this is a time in the whole history of the world, humans have control over life on this planet, and we're not doing a very good job of it. And there's concerns that we're destroying this planet. Well, the planet will be around, but we're destroying ourselves. And then the consensus odds is 1 in 5. And so that gets people's attention of, oh, there are problems out there that need to be solved. And so, and I sort of gravitate to that kind of stuff. But think through, this would be something else to do when you're sitting among yourselves, is to, well, what are the problems out there that catch your attention? If you're interested in policy and practice, well, what are they? And again, there's no correct answer here except the one you care deeply about, and then go for it. And then when you start getting into the guts of this, 3 bundle that I gave you, and one is about topic choice, one is about setting the hook, and one's about hypotheses. I don't want to belabor these at this point. Topic choice, interesting to me, is it just has to matter to you. If it matters to you, then you can communicate to others why it matters. And you have to do it in a way so that you don't get the answer, why should anybody care about this? And then maybe later this or tomorrow I've got some articles I pulled off, and you can just watch how they set up their papers to communicate that this is an important topic. But you have to be able to feel it in your bones. It matters. A lot of times people find their questions and problems in the literature, and they just read through the literature and they find some gap or some hole or some puzzle, and they say, I want to go test some moderated relationship with something or other. And that's fine, and you can learn the craft of doing research. But if you're really good at this, you look at the world in your own life, in your own experiences, and say, what needs to be done here? And it could be on in the theory, it can be a knowledge contribution, it can be coming up with a policy issue, it can be coming up with a program evaluation with respect to something as to how we're water issues, or it can be anything. And then you own it, it's yours. And the universities that I'm familiar with, the big universities, the research-centric universities, are looking for people that are setting the agenda and that are finding new problems or addressing old problems in new ways. And they want your imagination and creativity. They don't want you to just look in the journals and find some new moderator and then do really good empirics to go do it. I mean, you can do that, and you'll cultivate your mind, and you'll be a good, solid thinker and all that. But if you're going to get a job at Harvard or MIT or Oxford or or someplace, they want people that are setting the agendas as best they can, and they want you to cultivate your own mind, which goes back to that idea of, well, who are you? What kind of engage you? That little exercise I said will start to give you a little window as to what you care about. So find something that's significant, and then there's the whole question of what's a problem, and that's tricky to the scope. And if you read the essay, it says not too big and not too small. You go, well, all right, that's really useful. Not too big and not too small, but the pressures are for small because you need lots of articles, and so you start slicing the data set, and you get tiny little questions because you can write lots of little articles. But if you do that, nobody cares about your papers because sometimes you're better to take 3 and put them all together in one. But then you got the control system to deal with. And then also there's a sense of if it goes too big, it's unmanageable. It's impossible to do it and do it well. And after that's just something that it comes from experience and talking to people that have done it as to what is too big and what's too small. And I find, like in our case, when working with doctoral students, what I love are people where it's big and they got a big imagination and they want to do a lot. And then you say, okay, look, let's land. The term I always use is let's land the spaceship, and we'll find something to do, and then we'll pick the most important first step, do that, and then you set yourself up to do the next study and the next study, subsequent. It's a part of a 5-year journey or a 6-year journey. It doesn't all have to be done at once. I love those kinds of students. We have a problem there's people have been writing about problems with elite education even, and the term is excellent sheep. We breed our students to be compliant, to be a sheep, and we breed them to be excellent, to give them tests, multiple choice tests and all that, and they can get 100 on these tests. They can memorize anything and spit it back at you. And the way I was taught was in that kind of a system where I'm very good at memorizing stuff. You give me anything. You give me something to memorize, and I can, but that doesn't do anything. That's not an education. And so the challenge is for people that are excellent sheep, they sit around saying, well, what problem do you think I should address? You tell me what to do and I'll do it, because a lot of the education is tell me what to do and I'll do it. So maybe you're in this transition now too to become an independent scholar, and your educational system was like mine, where they didn't want the person saying you're archaic, sit down and shut up and don't bother me. But if you're raised in that kind of an environment, it's really hard to step out and then suddenly start shaping conversations. But that's what it is. You got to free yourself of that past if you had it. That was mine. It took me a long time to be able to write with some confidence, to have, because with full humility, you say, I don't know, I don't know anything, all right? I don't know much. Who am I to say that Aristotle was a dope or something? And, but you don't say he's a dope. You say, you appreciate what he did, and you say, well, here's an idea to make it better. But you have to be able to have some confidence as you go forward, and with humility. So you need confident humility in order to find a question, but you've got to be able to put yourself out there. And then there's a sense with the topic choice of exactly to what's in the room is we want to make a difference in the world. So at the end of these papers, and especially in business, and most business papers, they always have an implications for practice. And it's either do this or don't do this. Stop doing this. There's some practices that people are doing and you think this is not such a good idea, or do this in light of the results. And so if you can come up with a paper that is interesting theoretically, contribution to knowledge, and has practical implications to policy and to the Africa, that's what everybody wants if you're in an applied field. And so if you can come up with a question that is theoretically interesting and practically relevant, that's like the t-shirt line, then you're a hero. Everybody loves you. And then you just have to keep working the problem and the question to figure out what that would be. Here's the conversation about hooks, as to how you engage the world. And this is the start of a conversation, and then maybe later we'll pull up some articles and we can watch how people do this, because there's a craft to setting the hook for a paper. And I was a first-year doctoral student, and the professor that was Jean Brett, this terrific woman who's professor at Northwestern, was my advisor, and she would always say, what's the hook for the paper? Why should I read this? And then for me, this is just from my experience as an editor, I just look and said, well, there's different kinds of hooks broadly. And I haven't written this up. This is just the world according to Jim Walsh. I just made this up, but I think this is pretty close to true. There are 5 generic kinds of approaches to papers. And then just watch, as you read papers, just watch, be self-conscious of the first 3 pages of a paper when you read them, and just watch what they're doing, and do it in the A-level journals, the best journals, the ones that are really, really hard to get into because there's a really exacting process there. And just watch how they set them up, and just really deconstruct, look paragraph by paragraph of what they're doing, and then you'll see that not all papers are the same. So here I have, correct. So there's a relationship between X and Y that's established. There's a correlation between the two, and it's pretty strong, say. And everybody knows that to be true. And so you say, okay, I'm not challenging the fact that that's strong. What I want to know is, why is it so strong? What's the mediating mechanism? And the mediating mechanism, you got X to, well, whatever it is. Depending if you've got a regression equation, that's the dependent variable, or left to right, it's the dependent variables over there. It doesn't matter. But, X predicting Y, and you got a strong correlation, say, of 0.5 or something, or 0.6, which is pretty strong for social sciences. And what's Z? What's in the middle that makes that go? That's to the knowledge and the theoretical contribution. It's answering the question why. Why does this happen? And that's big in scholarship, is trying to get that squared away. So the setup for that is, why is really important. You will say why that why variable or construct is crucial for the state of humanity and the Anthropocene and saving us from extinction or whatever it is. And you'll say, well, of all the predictors of why, X seems to be crucial. That's got the biggest correlation coefficient or the biggest beta, but we don't know what's going on in the middle. And so you'll watch, they'll set it up. Everybody cares about Y. There's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There's 27 different ones. X is the crucial one. What's going on there? boom. And then you will then look to other ideas and you'll say, well, here's an idea, it could be Z. Setting up that kind of a paper is pretty straightforward, and that's what you're going to do. And you'll watch people do that. On the other hand, if it's correct, or you think it's correct, there's a strong correlation. This gets to the secular side of our field now. There's a lot of talk of scientific misconduct in the air, more now than I've ever seen in my profession. And I think it's tied into the evaluation systems that we have and the control systems that we have. And there's such heavy pressure to publish and heavy pressure to publish in certain journals, people start cheating. It's life and death, and so they start cheating. And so there's kind of a crisis in academics now, is that can we trust any of these studies? And that becomes the end of us if people can't trust. And there's a lot of talk now in the public press about if academics is corrupt, and now we have fake science and junk science, all this stuff. And then our standing, our legitimacy is in question. So there's a lot of talk now about replication. And so you will do the exact same study, and you'll say, we're just checking. Well, a replication study is very different than setting up a mediation study. And then you got to be careful. And if you're going to replicate, what people do is they'll often replicate a number of them all at once, because otherwise you're basically saying, I think this guy's a degenerate. I'm going to test his study. But
publications perhaps could be contributing to cheating in terms of research and other things, because as a professor you need to publish a number of papers, and especially within a specific period, and the board, editorial board of publishing institution is having so many questions and perhaps rejecting things without counting to somebody's background. For instance, maybe if I'm publishing an American journal, and the comment that comes, the adverse comment that comes with my research paper from my cultural background, I may not have that courage, if you don't have counseling, to continue.
Oh, well, there's two questions there. There's one is, why are the data wrong, faked? Why do we see misconduct? And then how do we root it out? And so the whys can be all over the place. It's often publish or perish, and people, it's their life, and they've got children to feed, mouths to feed, and so they do this. What's happening now is if you're doing an empirical paper, you have to submit the data set to the journal so that people can look at it themselves and make sure that this is correct. People scream about that, because if you collect your own data set and it's proprietary and you spend a lot of money and a lot of time, and then that's out to the world, everybody else will take it and then analyze your data and do, so there's that. But it's getting to the point where you have to be able to trust it. The other side is why do papers get rejected, and then it's cultural issues and all of that. That's a separate question, which I'll come to that a little later as to what's going on that front. From what I've seen inside the review process, people are trying really hard to make these papers as good as they can be, and they don't want to publish junk science or stuff. But there's very sophisticated people on the other side are cheating, and it's not a lot of them, but all you need is a few, and then it really just ruins the profession. So, but I'll come to the other one about the cultural bias and stuff. And I'll be defensive about it. I'll let you. So anyway, all right. So you have that, or there's a correct answer, and so we want to implement. We got programs and policies to make it be. So there's a relationship between smoking and lung cancer. Now we're going to create anti-smoking campaigns to see if it works. Or if you're a marketing person, I was just hanging around with Phil Kotler, of all people, last weekend, who helped create the field of social marketing. And a lot of their work was getting prostitutes in Thailand to have use condoms to stop AIDS and stuff like that. And you can use marketing. There's a relationship between unprotected sex and AIDS, and you got to get condom use. And so we need a program and so we'll use everything we know about marketing persuasion to get people to wear condoms. And so that's. And then you're going to do a study evaluating the efficacy of these programs, or you might set up a field experiment. I'm sorry? Okay. and you may set up a field experiment to say, well, there's 3 different kinds of programs to get prostitutes to wear condoms, or the Johns to wear condoms, and let's test the efficacy of these things, and that's a study. And you can imagine setting that up has its own problems with AIDS, links to condom use, problems with the condom use. Here's program 1, program 2, program 3. We collect the data, see which one works, go with program 1. There's a hook there. It's clear, compelling, and the way you set that up is different than a mediation study, is different than a replication study. I mean, I don't want to go on, but, or you may look to, but I will. You look at the relationships and you care about a relationship between X and Y, and the literature's all over the place. You'll see some strong coefficients that are positive. You'll see some that are negative. You'll see some that are 0. You say, what's going on here? And then you'll start reading carefully in that literature, and this could be in the literature, and you say, boy, it seems like a methodological artifact. Every time they do a survey study, I see it positive, and every time it's experimental, it's negative. Or say, well, there's something going on with the methods, and we're gonna just do a methods and see if we play this. Or you've got some theoretical variable, a moderator about the strength of the institutional regimes or something, and you get data from 2 different ones and you test it. So, but if there's an ambiguous relationship, the moderator is to say, it's positive in this situation and negative in that situation. So the moderator variable is the one that says situation. And so if you're setting that up, the front end is you celebrate X, you celebrate Y, you celebrate all the work, you cluster them out and say these are positive, these are negative, why do we see the difference? You hypothesize some moderator that this is going to do it, you introduce that, and you say, I'm going to go collect data to assess these things, boom, you do it, and you see what the results are. Again, that's its own hook. There's a way you can imagine how you set that up. You set that up differently than you set up the other ones, and off you go. If it's ambiguous or you don't know, you can do a research review. It doesn't have to be empirical. 2 kinds of research reviews. If there's not a whole lot of data out there or studies, you can do one that's just in your own mind or your own head, and you just collect all of these things and you appraise the literature and then you say something about it. Or if there's a ton of empirical studies, you can do a meta-analysis and then you see. But you're trying to figure out what's going on in an ambiguous area, and you take stock of the literature and you write a big literature review. People love those. They get very highly cited. Limited, maybe limited ties in the other ones. Wrong is, there's loads of people that like to say everything you know is wrong. And so, I don't know. Institution theory says all firms respond to their environment, and there's a pressure for sameness in order to establish legitimacy with respect to your external environment for firms. Resource-based view of the firm says the only way to have sustained competitive advantage is you have to be different, and then you have these various resources that will make you different in the world. So you have one theory out there that says that all firms are going to press towards similarity, and another theory out that says they're all going to be different. And you say, well, you can't be both. So then you have a big debate. Is it the resource-based view of the firm or institution theory? When did they, so you're going to have a debate. And then the ones is they got something new to say where no one's ever thought of this before. And those are great. You can do it. But motivating them is kind of tricky because you're trying to say no one's ever done this. And so then what you're trying to do is motivate a whole. So you talk about all the terrain outside of it and say, well, with that terrain, there's a hole, and no one's ever done it, and therefore we have to do it. And I've written a couple of papers like that, but that's tricky to motivate. You have to just establish everything around it and say this thing doesn't exist, but that can be done too. You run the risk of having some reviewers say, Smith and Jones did this 25 years ago, don't you know? And then you go, oh, well, I guess I'm doomed. So you gotta, you go into that one, if you gotta do your homework on it and stuff. But I just hope you see that these are hooks, the front ends of papers. Once you find the ones that you like and you get a sense of what you like to do, how they do it, and then learn from them, and you can teach yourself. And you'll find yourself as you go through this, and this is just me, is you will have yourself your own inclinations. There'll be a certain kind of move you like to make. And then for me, I was thinking about this. There's 3 that I like to do. One is the correct. I look at mediating mechanisms sometimes, and more earlier in my career than now. And so I had X and Y relationships and saying, what's going on in the middle? How does that work? And so there's some papers I wrote about that. I'm also, for whatever reason, I think it's my memorization background, I'm really good at keeping like hundreds of studies in my head at the same time. You know, maybe not all at once, but and writing research reviews of an area. And I've done that 4 times and wrote 4 papers of 4 different areas that seem to matter to people. And then I founded a journal called the Academy of Management Annals, which is all about research reviews, and then edited that for 5 years. So I like doing that kind of thing, and it's a service to the field to just bring together all this different literature and put it in one place. Becomes enormously helpful for doctoral students, because when you want to come into an area, you would love to pick up a 40-page paper where someone sat and put 500 studies together and said, here's the world, and then go. So I like doing that, and then I like coming and you can't do this all the time, but I've written a few of those kinds of papers that seem to have mattered. But I'm a lover, not a fighter. So the big debates to say everything you know is wrong, I don't like doing that stuff. But some people love that kind of thing. It's just not me. It's not my personality. But so and I spent some time last weekend with a dean at Dartmouth, actually, the Tuck School of Business, and he made this comment to me, which I thought was perfect for a dean. He said, everybody has their superpower. Everybody has their superpower. And so the trick is to find out what's the superpower of your faculty member and then amplify them and then make everybody great, make people better for knowing you, and don't try to turn everybody into the same person. So you'll part of telling your story and figuring out who you are and what are your passions and who's your best teacher and why do you want to be a scholar, and then what kind of, with respect to the whole, what's your disposition. Figure out what your superpower is and cultivate it. You've got it, whatever it is, and then just go for it. Okay. I won't. It's just a story of my life. Who cares? What I would ask you to do, again, and I'll give you this deck so you can remember this, I would love for you to talk to each other about these kinds of things. So I didn't tell you my story, but tell something. Did you grow up? This is what we do with our students. What'd you learn from that? Then reflect on your own capabilities. What's your superpower at some level? And then say, like, what are your commitments? And it may be, I'm interested in being a scholar for the life of the mind, the joy of discovery and contributing to knowledge. And I'm really kind of a theory person. And I'm not so much, I care about practice in the world, but I'll let others take my results and then do something with them. Or I'm really interested in practice. And boy, when I learned about social marketing, I really care about AIDS. I care about condom use. I'm going to be a program evaluator. We're going to solve this problem, and I'm going to figure it out. And I'm going to learn everything there is to know about field experimentation, and we're going to get this thing done. Whatever it is. And then relatedly, it could be AIDS. It could be the need for better behavioral decision theory, whatever it is, whatever the needs are. And then say, what do I want to do? But I would really encourage you to have these conversations, especially now in the doctoral program, so that you launch yourself into an area that you care about. And you've been like mindfully considering what are you doing here, because you're going to spend a fair bit of time in that world, reading and shaping and finding your question, and then there's an expectation that you'll write a number of papers, but you have your own expectation that you want to write a number of papers, and so the distinction I'm always interested in if I meet people that are looking for a job and stuff, I don't ask them about their research question, because it's where they are right now. It's one. I ask them about their research quest. I want to know what their big trajectory is. What are they trying to do? And this one study is a piece of it. But you're going to hire them, and then they're going to be there forever, or 5 years or something. But they're going to have a number of other questions. So I want to know broadly what animates you, and it's kind of this stuff. And then you say, oh, this is a colleague I want down the hall. This is someone I want to be around. They will inspire me. And they're inspiring me, back to the beginning, by their curiosity, their enthusiasm, and their smarts. And you're around people that are enthusiastic. And then they're role models, but they're doing, and I'm fortunate. I know a lot of people that are very talented and capable people. They do very different stuff than I do, but I'm inspired by their example. And I just love to be around them. And then they're smart, they tell you stuff, they help you install. But really do this. And so we can get in now. I'll shift gears and we'll talk about the craft of this and how to do the work. But I'm spending a lot of time on this because this is really important. If this isn't grounded and it's not coming from your head, heart, soul, and all of that, I mean, you can do it and you'll do it for a while and you'll learn the craft. But after a while, you're going to wake up in some midlife crisis and say, well, what am I doing? I'm making bricks. And then it's back to the beginning. You're encountering students and you don't really care what you're doing. And the students are going to figure that out pretty quickly. And you're trying to write papers and you don't really care. And the reviewers are going to figure that out. And then, you're in the wrong profession. There's another side is you could be in the right profession and it's managed improperly. And we got to worry about changing the structure of higher education. But that's another question for another seminar. So I'd really encourage you to have these conversations with each other or think it through yourself so you know what you're doing. But everybody I know, and I've gotten to know a lot of people in this career, when I sit and talk to them, I always say, tell me a story of your life. How do you do what you do? Why do you do it? They all have answers. They all have stories to tell as to why they're doing this, and it's inspiring. And they're all different. There's no correct answer, but they've got them. And if they don't, they're usually... they're not doing it 20 years later. They're doing something else. So, okay, I don't want to beat a dead horse. That's what I'm saying. Talk to each other. Okay, so now I want to get into some of the guts of how we do this. I was told we have like another hour. I guess if I spend an hour or so just to dig into the mechanics of how do you actually write these papers, what are some particular tips, techniques, tricks, just the subtleties of all this. I've got some slides to open the conversation. I think I have some humility about all of it. I know I do, but I also know I've been doing this for 35 years, and I'm happy to share anything you want to know. I'm an open book, so I'll do this. If you got any questions about any of this, let's just talk, okay? I mean, I just have some slides just to get us going. There's two aspects to writing. I call them for me it's the micro and the macro perspective, and they are very different. They're two different skills, and at least for me. And the micro side is what you learned in middle school, is to the 3-paragraph essay, the topic sentence, the transition sentences, verbs, adjectives, no split infinitives. The use of commas, all of that is the style, the word choice, and that matters. And then for when you're writing for an English journal, and English is not your first language, and here it seems like there's a lot of people who are languages, but for non Anglo authors, people think, because my language, I'm writing in a second or third language, I get hurt. There's lots of ways there's help for that. You can hire people, or the journals will even provide people. That will, people have the idea that they're getting killed because the grammar is not right, and people notice it. But in my experience, people, if they see that, they'll actually go out of their way to help. They'll read between the lines to say, is there an idea here? And then help, because again, but my experience, if you're a doctor, editors can see if it's papers from a doctoral student. I'll talk about that in a second. And they want to help that doctoral student because someone helped them when they were a doctoral student. And if this gets actually the guts of what goes on behind the scenes. If a big shot, a real famous person sends in a paper for review and it's sloppy, and you're the editor, I know a lot of these big shots now. They're my pals and friends. It's like, get out of here. I say, just go. You're better than this. What are you doing wasting our time? Do your homework. If it's a doctoral student, they'll say, well, they don't know, and I'll help them. I'm not going to help a big shot and say, you go. What are you doing? Or that big shot may have had a doctoral student write the paper and then was too lazy to fix it. And then I'm much more likely to reject a famous senior person's paper for something like that than I am a junior person. I'll go out of my way to help a junior person because, again, and I try to be gracious to all, but I get annoyed with senior people do that because they're basically using the review process to write the papers for them. But I digress. So you got the word choice that matters. You want to get that right. When you're doing empirical work, especially, you've got to get this checked very carefully. They cannot have typos. You want the formatting to be correct. Look at the formatting. In some journals, they want the title of the book or the article, excuse me, or the journal of the book in italics. In some cases, they want them underlined. In some cases, they want the author, and then they want the year, and then they want the title. In other cases, they want the author, the title, and the year later. Look at the format for the journal and put it in the format of where it's going and make sure it's correct. And it takes you, for me, actually, that's kind of joyous. If you're at that point, the paper's written, so I'll spend a day doing that. All those details matter in an empirical paper, especially in an empirical paper, because there's a lot of decisions are being made behind the scenes, your data. And if your paper is sloppy, and there are typos in your paper, and there's no care with the references, or if people read it and there's missing references, and that's easy because the paper goes through many versions, and you had a paper with Smith and Jones in version 1 but not version 2, and then you put it back in version 3 but you forgot to put in the references. You got to sit down and make sure that there's no extraneous references. All that matters because it shows your care. And if people see the typos and the wrong formatting and the missing references or the formats are off, they'll say, well, if they couldn't get that right, can I trust the data? Because there's a million data decisions to be made that they can't see. So you got to get that right. That's really important. But that's all just writing. That's the micro writing. The macro writing is, what are you actually saying here? What's the structure of your argument? What's the hook? How have you motivated the hook? How are you moving from one section to the next? What are your theoretical ideas? How are they established? Do they make sense? Does hypothesis 1 relate to hypothesis 2 and hypothesis 3 in a clear and coherent fashion? All of that stuff. And so that's the point of, what am I actually talking about here? And that's thinking. And it's writing, but it's thinking. And that's a very different, very, very different skill than verbs and nouns and formatting and all of that. And so for me, I can't think of any other way to do this than use an outline. So I work on papers. I always work off of outlines, and I'll work off of outlines for a long time on the macro side of writing. And I will only write and go to all the trouble and the labor of all the nouns and the verbs and the topic sentence and the transition sentences and the foreshadowing, all that stuff. That takes time. That's a skill to itself. I will only do that once I know what the argument's going to be. And so I generally don't write the first sentence of a paper until I know what the last sentence of the paper is going to be. I try to get in. And so what I do is, so here is, I didn't talk about it. This is the last sort of major paper I wrote from a couple years ago. And it's a whole, I tried to come up with a theory of business. I was looking around with all in the world of stakeholders and shareholders and communitarianism and contractarianism, or the firm as entity or the firm as a property. There's all questions about the theory of the firm and how well that serves society with the invisible hand and all that. And there's just endless debates back and forth and back and forth. And then I had this intuition that, we don't have a theory of business. And we're mistaking a theory of the firm for a theory of business. And then I spent a year and a half wandering around talking to people, say, have you ever heard of a theory of business? Because I didn't want to be surprised with the Jones and Smith paper from 1953. And then no one had. And so then I found a co-author, a moral philosopher, because it had to be normative, and then came up with this first attempt at a theory of business. It's sort of everything in a longer conversation over lunch, it's pretty much everything I know and everything I am is in that paper. Maybe it's sort of too wordy. But now we're working on the second project out of that. We're looking at the nature of business value, which is tied into business. And so we're writing a paper about value and values. So what we have is, so the paper on the left is the paper on the left is the published paper. The paper on the right is the outline. So we go through, and he's in Philadelphia. I'm in Michigan. He's about 800 miles away. And so we go back and forth with outlines, and then we talk. And so we'll talk, and I'll come up with an outline. This is one where I did the outline, and then he's in red and in black on the margins, and he's making comments on this. And then we'll go back and forth, and then we'll talk on the phone or Skype or something, and then say, all right, who's going to take a shot at it? Let's redo this whole outline again. and then we'll go back and forth with the comments and the margins, and we get it. And so then at the end of the day, well, this is where we are right now. That's again, that's page 1 and 2, where we're highlighting in different colors, and we're just trying to figure out what's going on. That's the outline as it stands right now for this next paper I'm going to write. And so that's, whatever it is, 9 pages, single-spaced, with all the different sections moving through. And I haven't been able to work on this actually in 9 months because I've been teaching like crazy all year. And I just talked to this guy last week because summer's here and I have a sabbatical coming. And so now I said I will take all of this, rethink it, and come up with a brand new outline in light of everything else I've thought about in the last 8 months and all this feedback, and then give it to him, and then we'll start again. And then we will just cycle through this over and over and over again. But to turn all this into words and then say, I don't like those words, and it's just way too painful. I would much rather just work with bullet and an outline, and then once we get it squared away, then write. So you can do it any way you want. And some people just write, and then it comes to them as they write. But I find this to be very helpful, and it's helpful to work with co-authors elsewhere, and it saves you all the stuff, the macro. But I also wanted to show you that this is writing a theory paper, and this guy's 5 years senior to me. He's been doing this he's been doing this for 40 years. We have 75 years of experience trying to put this stupid paper together, important paper together. But then this is the 5th version of the outline, and there will be 5 more before we ever say, okay, let's go. And we're just trying to figure this out. But to write a paper I just wanted to show you, this is what's behind the scenes of writing a paper. And this is going to take a while. It's hard. But we're going this is not too big, not too small. It's kind of big. But we're, getting, as I say, I'm going to be dead soon. Come on, Tom, we got to do this. And try to write something that matters. And I'm under performance pressures of a different kind at this point in my career. But I just wanted to show you, this is what it's like behind the scenes of doing it. These things don't just write themselves in a month or two. You sort of work through your ideas. And this is a theoretical paper. The empirical paper, then you got all that middle part of what's your design and your measures and validity and reliability and then your analytic strategy and all that stuff has to be done. And you can do that too. All right, so 1 is think before you write. 2, entering a conversation is really important. When you're writing a paper, you're not just writing your own paper like you are for a teacher when you were in middle school or in high school or in college. You are entering a conversation, a worldwide conversation about whatever topic that you care deeply about. And so you will have intuition or your idea, and then you go out into the world and say, well, who else has been working on this idea? And then you have to figure out what they have said about it. And then you have to find your way to enter that conversation, which means you have to read and you have to know what other people are saying. And your reading, it's not the same as the kind of reading you were doing in college and other times. Now you're reading because you're trying to enter a conversation. You are talking with the people that are writing about this topic. And it's a very different mindset than when you were in college, before you were a scholar. And so you're reading with a purpose now. You're reading to say, what are people saying about condoms and AIDS and developing, whatever it is. And you're doing that reading. And you're going to enter that conversation, again, setting that hook. Something to say to them. So you have to appraise what's been said. And you have to be able to write with some confidence. And you can, with confidence, you enter in. As you enter the conversation, even if you're going to do a debate and say everybody's wrong, this isn't a game, and people have spent their own 3 or 4 years or 2 years or whatever it is writing their paper. You want to honor their work, and they gave it their best effort. And so for me anyway, I always approach with humility and gratitude that somebody else cares. These are your people, for goodness sakes. Why would you trash them? So it'll always be a yes and or maybe a yes but it's not a no but kind of thing. Honor where they are and then advance your point. What you want to do is get to the point where the people that have done the work before, that they're grateful that you saw something in that work and then you took the time to honor it and build on it. And they'll say, and you're right. This is archaic. It can be better. Or this is confused. You're right. It bedeviled me when I was writing it. I didn't, truth be told, I wrote with confidence. No either. And you've identified that. And then as you find these people, the way you build an international community is with conferences. And we can talk about that later too, as to how you build the community and how you write people to be a part of a symposium at any kind of a conference, because conferences always want symposia, or most conferences do. And so you find the 3 other people or 3 other teams of research in that area, and you can call them up. And they say, okay, I'm working on whatever it is, impression management processes in the boardroom or something, and you'll find the people as you read the literature as to who's doing that, and then you invite them and say, well, how would you like to be on a panel where we'll explore the following issue that you've identified as being sort of problematic or puzzling, and people will often be gratified that you actually read their work and you cared enough to invite them, and then you invite them, and then you put to debate the puzzle. You've got all these friends now, you know them by name, and you all gathered together in some place, and then you're in. But you have to enter that conversation. Here, what I want to show you is a formal way to do that. And this is what I did with I have a first-year doctoral student right now in Michigan, and this is how I introduced her to the field. I was trying to figure out what's the best way. She has a degree, she's smart, but she's never done this. I was trying to figure out what's the best way to teach her how to think and how to engage a literature. So for what I decided to do was to say, I had a question and said, what we need is a research review of this particular issue. And the issue, it's just for the sake of argument, but this is what it is there's all these corporate citizenship, corporate social responsibility initiatives and all, and they're done for many reasons, but one is, if you're a marketing person, it's cause marketing, and you're going to attract and retain a customer base. If you're a human resource person, you're going to attract, select, and retain a high commitment workforce. And I said, well, what's the literature to say about that? And we don't know. There's a person in marketing, C.B. Bhattacharya, for the marketing people. He's written review articles about cause marketing and what works, what doesn't, why it works, why it doesn't work. With respect to the human resource side, no one's written that paper that I've ever seen. So I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. She cares about this kind of stuff. So let's go find every article that's been written about the extent to which corporate social responsibility initiatives are used to attract, select, and retain employees in a firm. What's been said about that? And then I said, since you've never done this, what I want you to do is create a spreadsheet where you code up articles and you deconstruct articles so you can see what's at the essence of them. It'll help you see what's being said. So this is what a portion of what that spreadsheet looks like, and she's been working on that this year. So I just want to go through briefly how this works. The idea is there are journals for this. This is the Academy of Management Annals with my name on it. That's the annual review of organizational psychology and organizational behavior with my wife's name on it, actually. She's an editor of that. And then you'll see this on the handout. It's very hard from way up high. But in essence, what I said is, look, just strip it down to its essence. And I'll just briefly, who are the authors? What year was it published? What was the order in which it was read? So because she's brand new, and when she's deconstructing an article, if it's the second one she's read, this is the second article she's read in graduate school, I want to know, because she doesn't really know what she's doing, versus the 30th article, she's better at it and stuff. So I want to be able to, even there, it's a methodological move. I want to know, does she know what she's doing as she's reading these things? And I'll go check that. To keep track of that. What's the title of the paper? What are the questions or the hypotheses in the paper? What was the theoretical foundation behind all of that? What was the nature of the sample? If it was an empirical study, who were these people? What was the sampling strategy? What was the time of the study? So they collected data, what years? So you want to keep track of that. Were they collecting all the data in the early 20s, 2000 to 2007, before the recession, or in 2010 to 2018, after the recession? You may see different effects. And back to the moderators, and it's positive once and negative, and you say, well, there it is. And then you say, oh, but the samples, and it's not the year of publication, it's the year when the data were collecting. You say, oh, this may be a recession move. And then that's how you will find a moderator. It's the recession. But you just alert to this kind of stuff. And what was the methodology that they used? Then you go in, what's the independent variable? What was the dependent variable? Were there any moderators? Were there any mediators? And a moderator, again, is there's a relationship between X and Y, and it's pre-recession, post-recession, and it's positive in one or negative in the other. The mediator is there's a relationship between X and Y, and then there's the in the middle. Why does it work? That's the Z in the middle. Is that it? Then they say, okay, what were the results? What did they say about it? What were the limitations of the paper that they acknowledged in there? What were the future research opportunities? That's very interesting too. You can read the research opportunities. Sometimes if you get a big area with this work, you can code up what people have said they want to do future research on. And if you look across the 50 articles, you may see that 40 of those 50 articles for the last 20 years have been saying we need to do the following thing and no one's ever done it. But then if you're setting up a hook for a paper, you can say, well, as we all know, there's a literature on social responsibility and then on attraction, selection, and retention. There were 50 studies. 40 of them have called for the following work, and no one's ever done it. We're going to do it. Boom. All of a sudden, you got 40 pairs of authors that are waiting for this research to be done. That's a hook. You've got the attention of at least 40 people that'll say, well, all right, you're going to do this? I've been wanting to do this for 20 years. So again, as you code these up, you're looking for things like that for traction. And then are there any practice implications? Do they say do this or don't do this? And then are there any quotes in the paper that you can use? Because when you're writing, you're often going to find a quote. And a quote that's idiosyncratic as to, well, what caught your attention? For me, and then this is, I just put this in. If you're new to all of this, independent variables, dependent variables, moderators, and mediators. You're going to hear that all the time. Well, that's what it looks like. So the the dependent variable is earning potential, and intelligence is going to create wealth, but it's only if your academic achievement, if your education, if you're smart and you make money, but it's mediated if you went to school and you were good. But you could go to school and then be drunk all the time, and so what was your effort at school? And so that's the moderator. So that's how this all works. And again, I'm giving you all this. And so there's why questions, how, what, who, when, where. This is how science works. And so but for her as a brand new doctoral student, I want her to go into these papers and say, well, which is which? What's going on here? And then what do we see? And this is, once you've been doing this for a while, you just know this reflexively. It just, boom, it's in your head. But when you're a brand new student, you don't know this. and then to go through and then code up 50 articles where you're looking for all of these variables, then at the end of that process, you will reflexively know what the dependent variable is, what the moderators, what the mediators are, and all. You can see, you're learning a lot doing this. To the worthy quotes, there was a paper I wrote, which was a review. Were you still taking a picture? You want that? So I'm going to give you this deck. So you don't need to, but it's... anyway, yeah.
In using the papers, like we are in the 2018, is it necessary for you to limit yourself to a certain year, or you can go extreme?
Yeah, you can go anywhere. It depends what you're doing, but generally, you have to enter the conversation. And so what you'll see is, I was just, this is, again, it's my world, but there's a theory called institution theory that's very hot in organization theory and strategy. There's tons of people. The first paper is written in that. The first paper was in 1977, and then there was an important one in 1980 something, and then there was an important one in 91. If you're going to, the paper that was written in 1977 always gets cited. That's a foundational one. You have to know what's going on, but in order to make a contribution, so if you're going to make a contribution to institution theory, it started 40 years ago, so you want to understand the origins of it, and then you'll actually know how it's evolved through time, and then you're asking a question now about what's the current issue, which could be a 2018, 17, 16, 15, where we are, but you may see something in there. You've got a hook, and you're saying something wrong. There's a model, and what you want to do is honor the intelligence of the readers. If it's an institution theory paper, everybody that's reading that paper is going to know the literature from 77 to the present, and there may be something in that period there that informs the puzzle that's happening now. So it could have been something that was going on in the 80s, and then people dropped it. and then you're rediscovering it, and then you're going to apply it. So once you get in, that's why most dissertations, and this gets to the excellent sheep portion, most dissertations, the second chapter is a broad literature review, which just says this is institution theory, and the professors will make you write a history of your area, of everything that's been said in that area, so that you generally know what's going on. And then you'll be paying more attention to the recent work, perhaps, but you have to understand what came before it. Otherwise, you look like a dope, and you may actually rediscover something. So that's all the nuance. Sure, you may be reconnecting to the immediate present, but the past matters. And then if you really want to know institution theory, then you have to know where this came from before it. And once you do this for a while, you realize institution theory was a reaction to a theory that came before that, and then you want to know what that is. And in time, you'll learn all of that, and that might inform your writing. But it will also help you see things. So the answer is yes and no. It's you gotta engage the recent stuff because that's your point of departure, but you have to know where it came from, and it has to be situated, and you have to somehow communicate that you know that, because all your readers are going to know it, and they want to show that you're sensitive, that you don't want to bump into something and say, oh, here's what we need to do. And what we need to do is something that was done between 1985 and 1989, and you didn't know it. That's bad, So, and then you say, okay, what I want to do is bring back the work from 85 to 89, and you'll know what happened to that, and then why it petered out. And you say, these people were right, and it petered out for this reason, but now the world has changed, and now it's back. And then if that's what happened, you want to be able to communicate. That's what happened. So it's a yes and no. It's a lifetime to learn and a lifetime to master, but this is. Say that again, I'm sorry.
John,
Yes.
John, use the microphone.
Yes. So he asked, does the journal matter? It matters hugely. And it matters, there's the usual one as to, well, which ones reject 95% of the papers and which ones reject 5%. I'm going for the 5, there's that side of it. But when you're writing, by the way, if you want to go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. I'm an enthusiast and we don't have much time, so I'm just going to keep talking. But if you're writing, look at your reference lists at the end, and you'll see these are the people you're talking to. And then look at the journals that you're referring to. And that gives you a clue as to who's likely to want to read your paper. And so if you've got 10 or 15 articles coming out of a particular journal, chances are you're doing work that fits that journal. Sometimes you're trying to bring work from a certain world, a community, into another one. And then you got to honor that, but they're communities. These journals are focused on certain communities, and you'll learn that in time. And so then sometimes you may want to move from one community to another and say, these people need to know about it. But then you have to write with subtlety and sophistication and honor to bring that in to those people. But yeah, there's different styles. Like European journals, if you're more of a critical theorist, if you want to write about Foucault and Derrida and organization theory, and you try to put that in the Academy of Management journal, you might have a hard time doing it. If you want to put that in, I can rattle off organization studies or human journal management studies or human relations, they will publish that quickly. But because it's coming out of the European tradition versus the North American, et cetera. So, and you try to publish an American tight positive science article in organization studies, and they'll say, get out of America, So you'll know in time where to put them.
I was just wondering if you're selecting the journal articles for maybe your dissertation, the thesis, this issue of the community of scholars that you reference, because of course you honor them, they will get to know that at least you are aware of their work.
Right.
In your thesis, it's your thesis. So I'm just thinking if you have that liberty as to choose what really fits into your topic area. However, when it comes to publication, arguably, and from where you are coming from, is it is it true that the more you cite people that belong to that journal, the arguably easier you get published, or you have to just be open after taking care of the aim of the particular journal, and you want to speak to those people in that community? How do you balance these two when it comes to article and maybe thesis?
People often think, it's the sacred and the secular talking about it. Dimension, you're on the side of God, and you're just going to do the work. You're going to do the work, and you're going to read the work, and you're going to develop your hypotheses, set the hook, and go. On the secular side, do you want to cite work in the paper? We'll have that, or do you want to cite articles from that journal? Because these journals, they compete on impact factors, and then the more citations they get to their journal, their impact factor rises, and then so they have a system too. That's part of what's going on in our world these days. And so you will hear people say, you're gonna, if you're gonna in XYZ journal, you want to articles. There's a sense of, on the sacred side, if you want to publish in that journal, there's a reason why, and it may be because once you know about these, that's the community of scholars you want to reach. Sacred rationale is reading that work. But if you're bringing work from another domain in there, and they don't really do that work, and you're aware of that, then you don't do it just to do it, because it's not what your paper's about. But there's sometimes you will see reviewers that'll tell you need to cite this paper, that paper, and the other paper, and it's almost always the reviewers' papers, because you're getting evaluated on your citation counts, and then that's the way they get their citation counts up. I'm an old guy, and I'm on the side of angels. I would like to just do what's right and just let it. You start playing those games, you tie yourself up in knots, and next thing you know, you're who knows what you're doing. But what would I say? That impulse is out there. Sometimes you're in the place you want to go, and it's rejected from the second place you want to go, and then you're going to the third place, and it's fit in the world. And then you say, all right, I want to show that I've read this work, and you can maybe find the work that's in there. And so then you find 5 articles from that journal and put them in there. But as an editor, I never look at that. I'm looking at the quality of the ideas. Does it make sense? But I've got my own sense of what our mission of the journal is, and does it fit the mission? And then sometimes, if it doesn't fit, I'll look at the reference list and say, you haven't cited a single article from this journal. You're just in another world. You should send it there. But that's my own judgment, that just the topic and the way they approach it really doesn't fit. And you look at any journal, they will say there's fit with the editorial mandate. Even if you have 5 gratuitous cites, it's a trick that everybody knows. And so if I'm the editor or the reviewers, they say this doesn't really fit. They'll say, regardless of the 5 gratuitous cites, it doesn't fit. This belongs there. So I would just be true to the work and just, but that impulse is out there. And I've found people when they send some journals that you know who the editor is, or they'll know who it is once I've sent the decision letter, and you almost never ever get an acceptance right out at the beginning. It's always a revise and resubmit. You never, just know that. You never get an acceptance right away. So you're always going to revise. And then you get the name of the editor, and then I will see them citing my work in the revision. I always tell them to take it out and say, you don't have to do this. I just say, don't bother, unless it's relevant. But they're trying to curry favor, and I say, stop doing that. Just honor your own work. Don't honor me. So just, I'm old-fashioned. Just honor the question, do it right, and then let the chips fall. But there are differences. And then once you get into the area, you have to talk to people to find out what are the communities. But in part, you'll figure it out yourself as you find your question in your reading, and you'll discover that you're reading some journals more than others, and you'll say, oh, these are my people. And then you go from there. Just back to the tips and tricks. Look for those quotes. They're very helpful. This is a paper I wrote. It was a review paper where I was trying to help define a field on cognition, managerial and organizational cognition. And as I was reading this, it took a number of years to write this as I was doing other work. And I saw that after a while that the central construct went by many different names, and it went by something like 70 different names. And I just started, and I said, oh, this is interesting. And then I started keeping track, just on a sheet of paper. At the time, this was back in the dark ages, on a sheet of paper of the authors, the page number, and then what they called the central construct. And I just kept collecting them and collecting them and collecting them because I was trying to help define the field. And then I put this table in the paper. And that table are the 70-some sets of authors with their name for the construct. It was all the same construct, but there's 70 different names for it. And I knew that was going to be important to say we're working alone together. We all care about this. We're giving it different names. We got to come together and then figure out what this is. And then here they are. So there's 70-some teams of researchers that you know immediately, then they're going to say, did you get it right? And you got to get it right. But you know they're going to be interested in what you said. You know, you took the time to read their work, honor it in a table, and then on the right column are all but that was to the quotes. Once I was reading this, I realized, oh my goodness, this is, and it was just idiosyncratic to that. It was just your own intuition that they're different names, and then I just turned it into a table. And so so pay attention to quotes because you can use the quotes. What do I do with this thing? Oh, it's here. I'm an idiot. Back to the beginning, just to follow along. This is how I asked this doctoral student to do it. And this is now from her point of view, what are your points of appreciation? You, yourself, your own view. First-year doctoral student, never read these papers. I want to know, what did she think? Just from her own, what did you like about this? What are your points of appreciation? The next one, what are your concerns and the limitations of the paper? Not what the author said, what you said. And she's brand new and she doesn't have 30 years of experience looking at this, but you're a thinking creature, honoring, back to being the good teacher, honor her intuitions. And so and look at it, she's got that second column. She's writing on and on about this, about what it is. And then I said, other thoughts, and then she put in kitchen sink. Just what comes to mind as you read this? Just let your own curiosity go. What's on your mind? And there, the fact that she's brand new is really important. Then you want to know what she says in the first 10 versus the last 40, because by the last 10 or 40, because then she's seduced by that worldview, and then all of a sudden she doesn't see things anymore. So the kitchen sink ideas of the first 10 might be more interesting than the last 10 because she was brand new to this. Honor that. Then I say key takeaway and summary of the whole thing. If you had to tell your mother what this is about, what is this about? And then was this an empirical paper? And then is it retention, attraction, or selection? And then you go through, and then it turned into this and beyond. Is she's got this whole database. I wouldn't necessarily do this for somebody that's more experienced because you can go in and you make your own notes and go. But for a brand new student, and I knew there was only 50 articles only, and we're reviewing 50 articles, so I knew it wasn't 2,000 or 10,000. You can't do this for 10,000. But for 50, she can learn how to deconstruct an article. She's developing her own ideas, her own thought, seeing what the authors say, and then you'll see the duplicity of the authors acknowledge this limitation, but you caught one that they didn't acknowledge, and they're trying to sneak it through the review process, and she sees all that. And so it's important. And then start looking down the columns and start looking across the rows. What do you see? Looking down the columns, what are the dependent variables that are used? What are the moderators in? And then you can start counting them if you want for review. What are the moderators we see? And then you start looking across the rows. Well, and you can use Excel. You can sort by moderators and how do the effects line up? And so you play with the rows, the columns, and you start to see things that are in there. But notice that this is, and this gets to the last question. This is you're working within the body of literature as it exists with their own worldviews and playing with it. And then the hard part is to think it's figure ground issues. Then what you want to do, and I've been encouraging her, and she has a really hard time doing this, but we'll get there, is to step back and appraise the whole question itself. So this figure ground, she's in the figure, and she's analyzing the independent variables, dependent variables, how they did it, what are the results, all this. But the question of the question, is this a good question? Should we even be using CSR as an attraction device and a retention device? A CSR initiative is to take care of water problems in India, or it's to take care of public health issues or housing crises. What are we doing playing with the state of humanity to help attract workers to go work for a brick factory? Should we even be doing this? And then that's the second order of thought, which comes from your own intuition and your own quest and what you care about. And then you're going to say something fresh about that work that's not in the literature. But a big one is, are we asking the wrong question here? Is the question itself problematic? And that's where you're taking more of maybe a European perspective on this. You don't just drink the Kool-Aid and just move in and say, well, this is the work and here's what's been done, and now we need to do longitudinal stuff with multiple methods and multi-level, this the usual stuff. You're going to say something important about it, but you're going to say something important about the figure inside and then the ground that it sits on and the relationship between figure and ground. But this is thinking. This is where we started. This is how you think. And then you read closely at what's in play, but you went into that because you're interested in that question and you know why you're interested. You appraise what's in there. You see the strengths, the weaknesses, the limits. And you may say, well, boy, I look at all these independent variables and then I don't see intelligence for some reason. Why isn't that there? And I've done work in my life somewhere else on intelligence and I know that fits. Nothing is ever lost. Stuff that you read when you were 19 years old in college will suddenly come back into your head when you've got a gray beard, and then suddenly it matters. You go, oh, well, what about this? And then that's what it means to be creative and alive and have an alive mind. Or you read the newspaper and something will come to you, or you read, or you talk to people, etc. That's just what it is. But that's the kind of discipline to go through if you're going to do one of these things. If you're your dissertation and you're in a small area and you're going to encounter 30 articles or something, you might do this. So you actually know what's going on, that you're really on top of that. This woman at the end of this, Sarah Gordon, she may not know much about a whole lot of parts of the field. She knows an awful lot about this question, and it'll be with her for the rest of her life. And then 20 years from now, she'll bump into this and say, oh, I remember when I did, and then blah, blah, blah. And then it just happens, through time. Then what I did, this is back to thinking. What I asked her to do, because she doesn't know how to do this, I said, now there's a way to write these papers. So I was talking about the hook and how you set up a hook for a program evaluation versus a replication versus a mediation study. What's an article review look like? Because I couldn't just say, okay, look down the rows and look across the rows and down the columns and then think deep thoughts and then write this thing. There's a structure to writing articles, and she doesn't know what that structure is. So then I said, all right, go to my wife's journal. not mine was more cosmic. I think mine's better. I digress. No, but to go to that one because they're shorter reviews, and I said, go look at 10 articles until you don't see anything new, and then figure out what's the structure of these articles. How do they do it? Deconstruct the articles to see how they're writing these things. Different. But when you get to 5 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, after a while you see there's a basic pattern to it. So she came up with a pattern and I fiddled with it a little bit, but this is basically what she saw. She said, well, it has the following 10 attributes as I look at these articles. Well, then what she has found is now she has something of a recipe. When I say, and we haven't gotten to that just yet, to say, okay, I want you to write this thing, now it'll be, well, what's the core issue? Why define all this, the objectives, the history, all this stuff, and then it'll be fill in the blanks. And this is back to what's on that outline. We'll get to a point where we say, okay, now create an outline. You've read these 50 articles, you've thought these deep thoughts, you've got some intuitions. Start filling in the blanks here, and then we'll look at it. She's done 3 passes as to what are the results of this, of the survey of the literature, the points of view, and she's struggling to find it in there. It's hard. And she did one, and I said, well, blah, 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 how about this? And then she did it again, and I said, blah, 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 how about this? And then she did it again. I said, blah, 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 how about this? And that's the only way this is, teach a man to fish or or teach a woman to fish, give the woman the fish. I'm letting her work through it and then showing, yeah, that's a good start, but if you added, and then how about this? And it's nuance and touch and all, but in time, she'll get it. Could look at this and say, just give it to me, I'll do it. Thank you very much, it'll be fine. But I'm using this project for her education. I'm not doing that. I'm also going to make a contribution to the literature, but I'm going very slow And then she's got colleagues in the program that's working with someone when the professor wrote the paper and they have a publication already because they're the third author on it. And they're saying, oh, I'm not getting any papers written. I said, these people actually don't know anything because the professor's doing the work. You're actually learning something here. Slow down there, Junior. You know, and did you ever see that movie Karate Kid? Did that ever make it? Yeah, Mr. Miyagi teaches the boy, you know, the secrets of Korean karate or something. So I say, I'm the wise Mr. Miyagi teaching you. I say, I'm Mr. Miyagi, slow down, it'll be fine. You're learning more than you know as you go through this. But then we do that, and then she will come up with an outline, and then we're going to get into the micro aspects of how do you write. And then she wrote an abstract for the Academy of Management to go to a doctoral consortium, and she sent it to me just the other day. And her first sentence had probably 7 commas in it. It started here and ended up down there. And I go, oh, God. And I was in the airport, and I said 2 things. I gave, this is my feedback on this. I didn't have time to rewrite it or anything. I said, and think about this, too. For songs on the radio, the first line of a song is often pretty compelling. This is in the microdynamics of writing. That first line catches your attention. So I said, you need a first sentence of your paper has to be like the first line of a song. So don't start with a 7-comma sentence. You want to grab the attention with the first line. And then I said, break that sentence up. It's fine as it is. And then she didn't have anything about figure ground as to questioning the paradigm because she just doesn't. I said 3 things. Get a first line of a song, cut out, put some more periods in this, and then say something about the question itself, and then do it, and it'll be fine, whatever it is. And then, but there's how do you write, and that's its own. It takes forever to learn how to do this stuff. And then, by the way, I can sound like a real smarty pants know-it-all here, like, oh, I know all of this, and then I go to write something, and then boom, it's rejected. And then I told her, we're going to do this, and you're going to go through this whole process, and we're going to send this out, and then it's going to get rejected. And then you're going to look at me and say, I thought you were so smart, you're an idiot. And I go, well, all right, it's just what it is. but we were rejected for different reasons than you would have been rejected for before. It's just hard to do this, and it just takes a long time to go. In the spirit of telling you everything I know, I've shared this with people, also came from my editorial experience, and they go, holy cow, I'd never seen this before. This is the greatest thing in the world, blah, blah, blah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Blah, blah, blah. But I mean, people have been very pleased to see this, and so I want to give you this. This is the recipe as to how do you write a discussion section in an empirical paper. And for a theoretical paper, it's close to it, and you can play with this because you just don't have empirical results. But and it's the same thing too, to help educate yourself, you can do this so deductively and inductively. Deductively, if you will, I've looked at all of this and sort of figured it out, and I said, to me, this is generally what you'll see in a discussion section of a paper. Go look at good papers, and then just see what they're doing. Again, just deconstruct the discussion section. In the same way that Sarah went and said, I said, go deconstruct an article review. What are they doing? What's the structure? There's a recipe behind here. What's the recipe for a discussion section? And then see how it relates to this, or see what they're doing. Now, there are differerences by field. So I've read a lot of, I know there's finance people in here, I've read a lot of finance articles. The setup for a very different than a setup for management article. We have hypotheses in the front end. In finance, they don't. They have an intuition around something, and they go right to the empirics. And then the back end, it's a different field. And the back end, they'll talk maybe a little bit about the theory, but they're really generally not theory testing. They're looking at a phenomenon around whatever the phenomenon is. So it'll be a little bit different by field. But if you look at this, I mean, you can read it if you have any questions about this. But that's the essence of it. For the limitations there, the boundary conditions and the limitation, it's important to know that. And then this idea of acts of omission and commission can be a little confusing. I confuse myself with it sometimes. But sometimes you have omitted something on purpose because it's a big project and you can't do everything. And so you set the boundary conditions as you're only looking at this part of the phenomenon and not that. And then you motivate the paper that you're doing just that. And you say on the front end, we're doing just that. And then at the back end, then you say, well, remember we bounded it here. Now that we know the results here, now we'll relax those conditions, and then we'll go examine the boundary conditions. You did that quite mindfully at the beginning. There are limitations that come in, and sometimes you just made a mistake and you didn't know it in the front end. And then that's tricky, but there's something in there that needs to be, or there's 3 different measures to assess job satisfaction or something, and you use 2, and then you get a reviewer that's the author of the 3rd and say, well, why didn't you use the 3rd measure? Go, oh, geez, I don't know. I should have, And then you got to dance around it. And so a limitation is I didn't use the 3rd measure, I used 2, and then they may say go out and do it again and get the 3rd and whatever. But sometimes there are some things that you did in the paper that are problems of the paper, and then you identify them, and then it comes out in the review process, and then that's an editorial decision. Is this still worthy of being published, and then that becomes a research opportunity to do it with another measure the next time, or is it a fatal flaw and it kills it? But there's 2 different kinds of mistakes you'll make. Some of you made quite mindfully, and some you made by mistake. Or you may have come in on the front end and said, there's 3 different ways to measure this. I'm using these 2 because most of the literature uses these 2, and the 3rd is wickedly expensive and I can't afford it. Yeah, basically. And we're doing these 2, and then you tie into the results, and then you say something about how those 2 tie into the results of the 3rd, and then say, you're not quite so glib as to say people with money can go do the 3rd one, but I can't do that, or stuff like that will be done. But anyway, that's what that looks like. Just all I would say is look at articles and see what they're doing through this kind of a lens, and then as you start writing your papers, find papers that you like and try to emulate the style as you deconstruct them. But you'll see there'll be something of this structure in there. Then there's the process of responding to reviewers, and that's a world completely unto itself. And is anybody in here a marathon runner? Has anybody run a marathon? 42 kilometers? Nope. That was my, I've run 12 marathons in my life, back when I was skinny. I love running marathons. I sort of love marathons. Yeah, I guess I love running. They're kind of painful, but that's the point. And then they talk about the first half of the marathon and the second half of the marathon. The first half of the marathon are the first 32 kilometers, and the second half of the marathon is the last 10 kilometers. And it's often the first half of the marathon is the first 38 kilometers, and then the last 4. It gets hard at the end. It's just kind of the same. As you will write a paper, you'll go through all this work, you'll have the outlines, you'll collect your data, you'll set it up, and you'll have it's written and it's there, and then you send it out for review, and then the reviews come back in, and then they say, this is ridiculous, this is blah, 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 and they're all over you for this. And you go, oh, God. And then this gets back to your enthusiasm and your commitment and your thinking straight and your curiosity. Your curiosity at that point has been satisfied. You had a question about something, you collected the data, there will be that grand moment where you hit enter, and then what it's a variance or a regression or whatever it is will be done, and you'll see the coefficient, and you go, well, there's the answer. So in terms of your curiosity, your project is done. You know the answer. The world doesn't know the answer, but you know the answer. So then it turns to your ability to think straight and your enthusiasm to carry this through the review process. This is a world unto itself. And these are people that are trying to make it better, but they're also looking for the flaws and looking for the fatal flaws and looking to tear it apart. And you got to know how to handle this. And you actually, I now have an appointment at a university in South Africa, and I will, as soon as I get home, or the email connection's a problem. There's a student there that I've taken a liking to and all, and I'm not on her committee, and she's got 2 advisors, and one of them is kind of benign, and I know, and is not giving her a hard time, and another guy I don't know is, I want to take this guy up on professional malpractice. What he's doing to this woman is terrible, and I'll keep this all vague. But he gives her like 100 comments. She writes, and he just makes comments on all margins. What about this? What about that? What about this? What about this? What about this? What about that? And then she just says, what? And she's got a law degree. She's moving through. She's smart. She's engaged. I really like this person, and she's getting these comments. And this guy he hasn't stepped back to say, okay, here's 100 comments, but they're really about 3 things. The first 25 comments are about this, the next 50 comments about that, and then the last 25 are about the other thing. So what you really need to do is pay attention to this, that, and the other thing. This guy is not doing this. He's just giving her 100 comments, and she's new at this. And then she goes, oh, what? And then your reaction, and this is what I did when I was new, is all you can do is to say, well, this is Prof. So-and-so, who presumably knows what he's doing, and then I'll go set him up. Well, here's question 1. What's the answer? Here's number 2. Here's the answer. Here's number 3, number 4, number 5. And then you start changing your paper based on each one. This guy, he's just sitting, he's just the guy, he's doing this, and I'm sure there's points there, but he didn't find any coherence to them, and you start responding to 100 questions and then changing the paper, this paper will just be gibberish when you're done, because it's just, you're reacting to all this stuff. You will get comments like that, and so it's really important for you to know how to handle this stuff, and it's important for you that when you become me, that when you give feedback to students and you give feedback to authors, think it through and say, there's 3 themes here, this, that, and the other thing, and this, it's generally in this area, and here are 3 examples of it, and there's that, and, add some coherence to it, because you just destroy the other person. They don't know how to handle it. But today is your lucky day. I'm going to show you how you handle this stuff. You just have to know how to do this, because you'll get eaten alive, and because people don't know how to give feedback. People actually, by the way, don't know how to write good recommendation letters for jobs too, and you can get hurt if people don't know how to write letters of recommendation. And if they can tell you how to do that 6 years from now when you're done. So here's how you do it. This is it. This is the key to everything. And I hope you can read this. I didn't realize the room was going to be this large. I came at this as an editor, and this is because when you're an editor, you'll send a paper out for review, and I may get 3 reviews back, and then I'm going to send the paper to you when I'm done, and I'm straining to find the this, that, and the other thing. I'm not going to just say, well, good luck, go take care of these things, and I'll have my own views. So what I do is, I've done this hundreds of times. I take a sheet of paper, turn it on its side, and I make these columns, and if I'm an editor, I'll do it by hand. If I'm an author, I'll put this in Excel because I need to know it as I deconstruct. But what you're going to do is you're going to deconstruct the reviews, and you're going to pull them apart to see the signal through the noise. And it's really important to know how to do this. And so there are 7 different dimensions of a paper. When you see the reviews come in, they're going to come into 7 different dimensions. You've got to know what they are, and you've got to be able to make sense of these things. And so it's much like the beginning of this session. The hook, the front end, the setup, the question, the motivations, the hook for the paper. As you read the comments come in, look for anything that is in this by the reviewers, and you take reviewer 1 and you fill in the blanks. What did that reviewer say about the setup for the paper? Whatever it is, write it down, put the notes and where it came from. There it is. And then you go to number 2. There'll be questions about the foundations of the constructs, the processes, the literature that you've engaged. You'll often see you should read this literature or that literature, or there's a related construct that you didn't measure, and it's a validity question, and you've got discriminant concurrent validity, and you didn't assess. Whatever it is, they got a bunch of things, but there'll be foundational issues to the whole enterprise itself. What did they say about that? And then just make the notes there. Then there's the theory, and so I have within propositions and hypotheses and between propositions and hypotheses. Within it, as they're developed, and by the way, the relationship between a proposition and a hypothesis, a proposition links constructs. There's propositions and hypotheses, and there's constructs and variables, just so you know. Propositions link constructs. Propositions are and constructs in the land of ideas. Variables are your empirical measures of those ideas. And so when you have a hypothesis, you're positing a relationship between variables, the articulation of whatever that idea is. If you're digging in the land of theory and you've got a construct, and then you're making a distinction there, you're making propositions. So it's just the nomenclature you should know. But when you're talking about ideas and you're positing relationships between them, you're in the land of constructs and propositions. When you're going to measure them, you're in the land of variables and hypotheses. So if it's a theory paper, you're dealing with constructs. If it's an empirical paper, you're dealing with variables. But you're going to have hypotheses or propositions, and then there'll be the internal logic of hypothesis 1. And people may say, well, you set it up with this way and you've engaged this literature that way, but that's not my reading of the literature. You've got this wrong. I don't buy hypothesis 1. But they like 2, 3, and 4. Fine. And so that's within the hypotheses. They'll say something about it. But you'll also get questions about, you did 1, 2, 3, 4, but how come you don't have 5, 6, 7? Or in fact, 1 and 4, and it should be 5, 6, 7, and 2 and 3. Everybody knows that. It's nonsense. Get rid of it. Or it's a manipulation. It's a robustness check. Put in a footnote. That's not a, You'll get questions. You'll get feedback like that. But you want to just pay attention. What did they say about your theory that's in play? And again, that's if you're coming out of a theory-centric world. If you're in finance, the theory is often kind of given, and then it's empirical. And then for finance, then you go to the next one, is methodology. And as I say, that implicates everything you know about sampling, design, and analysis. And that's a complete world unto itself, is that how you go get, what did you use, how did you analyze it? It's everything you know about research methodology and statistics. And there's a lot that can be said there. Flaws of all kinds, different models, different techniques, all this stuff. And they'll tell you that. Get feedback about that. But notice, that's very different than the feedback about your hypotheses, which is very different than your feedback about your definitions in the literature, which is very different from your hook and why are we even reading this paper. These are different, very different notions that are coming into play. The results, they'll talk about the results. Generally, they don't say much about that. They're there, but they may find something that's intriguing to them, or that you keep it there. It's almost always empty, but there could be something in there. And then the discussion. I gave you the recipe before. They'll talk about what you had to say. And it may be, we love this, but you're too shy. You're too modest. You got to tell. Or you're way too grandiose. You're going so far beyond your data. You got to dial this back. They'll say stuff like this to you. Okay. And then they're going to talk about your writing, and you'll see comments about your writing. As I say, both the macro, the flow, and the coherence of the presentation, and the micro with the wording and the typos, we said before. And they're going to say stuff about that. So what you do when the reviews come in, you take them and put them into the columns, and then you get reviewer 2 and reviewer 3, and you look down the columns and you look across the rows, and you see what it is, and you'll see immediately what comes out. And sometimes the whole column, the theory and the foundations in the beginning, it's all fine. Everything is in your methods. You go, oh boy, all right. If they like my question, but it's all in there. Or they like the methods, but hate the question. Who knows what you're going to see. Or it'll be one problem with your methods and one problem with your literature review and one issue between hypothesis 2 and 4, and it really should be the same, or whatever it is. And you say, okay. And then what you do, so if I'm the editor, I will, if I'm the editor, I flip it around say two things. Then if you get it, if the editor will say something. So the editor if the editor is doing her job or his job, will have done something like this, and you'll see it. You won't see it per se, but you'll see them saying there are 3 big issues you need to attend to here, and then see what they say, and they will capture. And then chances are, when you see what those issues are, they're going to be sitting underneath a column with a lot of words from the other 3. And then if the editor is doing his or her job, the editor will say, you will see that reviewer 1 and reviewer 3 said this, and I agree. Or you'll see that, or then sometimes you'll see that reviewer 2 said that, and you don't have to worry about it. I don't agree. They'll let you go. And they'll act. But you want to know what the editor said. But then for you, what you have to respond to is all 4. You've got the 3 and what the editor said, and then it's your view. So you summarize all this stuff. And then you say, well, you got to think, what do I think about all this? It's your paper, too. But when it comes time then to rewrite the paper, what you do is you look down at these columns, and then you think it through, and you say, there are 4, whatever it is, 4 big issues I need to address as I rewrite this paper. And you know exactly where they came from. They came out of this. And then you may even think of something new, because it's been 6 months since you looked at it, and you say, oh, boy, I missed this. And there's 5 that you'll slip in there, because it's your own name is on there. But you say, these are the 4, and then what you should do is when you write back, you have to, the way this works is you'll get the reviews, and then you have to respond point by point to all these, the comments that the editors, that the reviewers say. And so you'll actually pull it out into sentence fragments or paragraphs, and you'll have in black ink that, and then in blue ink will be your response, and you'll say something, and then you'll point to what you did about it in the paper, ask and answer it all the way through. But start at the beginning and say, and this is with your comments. As I read the reviews, there are 4 broad themes in mind, and then you're basically acting like the editor and say, I'm taking care of this, that, and the other thing. And this reflects what the editor said in reviewer 1 and reviewer 3. And then that is what, and then you say, I've addressed these things, and then now let me tell you how I addressed each of your questions. But one second. And then as you do that, that allows you to have some coherence as you rewrite this thing. Then you can see the forest for the trees, and you go at it with those 3 big questions in mind, and informed by all the little pixels. So I think of the difference between a picture and the pixels that comprise it. You got all these pixels, that's the picture, and you write out of the picture, and then you deal with the pixels, and then there could be some small issues, and you handle them in some way, but that'll be the way that you don't get lost in the paper. And so my doctoral student friend in Pretoria, I got to talk to her and say, you have to do this, because this guy is not doing it. He's just dumping all these pixels on you, and then you don't know how to make sense of them, but this will allow you to do it, and then you can see the forest for the trees, and then you can go forward.
Thank you, Prof. It looks as if you almost answered my question, but however, I still need to ask. If different reviewers have contradictory assessment on the same point, the same issue, you, the author of the paper, you need to review. There's that kind of confusion because this man is saying that, and
right.
this reviewer is also saying that,
right.
and you are supposed to revise and represent. So
right.
What do you do in that situation?
So that's where it's back to having some confident humility. That's a really good point. If there's a disagreement, the editor may weigh in, but it's your paper, and then you may say, I'm a reviewer 2 kind of guy, not a reviewer 3 kind of guy or something. But then there's a kind of a sense that the reviewers are never wrong in the sense that their reviewer 3 represents a group of other scholars out there that have a different opinion about this. And so there's a sense of, all right, or if somebody's confused, you say, reviewer 3 is an idiot. He doesn't get it. But then you say, the reason why he's confused is I wasn't clear enough in my writing. You have to internalize that, and then we go. But you may have to take a stand and say, but then you just say, I'm stuck. There was a debate here. And then one of the issues, you may say, these are the 3 themes, and then here's a debate that I had to resolve. And then reviewer 2 said this, and reviewer 3 said that. And then you could give something, this is where, here's the history of this. I'm a 2 kind of guy. But when you rewrite the paper and then to the back end, to the limitations of the boundary conditions, this goes to your foundations and then boundary conditions. You set it up that I'm a 2 kind of guy, say, all the way through. And then at the end, you say, of course, there are other people look at this question from a different perspective, reviewer 3's perspective. Someone else can go forward. And then you engage that literature and say, well, this is what I've learned here from the 2 perspective. This is what I've seen, how it relates to what's out in 3. Future research should honor 3 and go investigate that. That's how you handle it. And then reviewer 3 may come back in and say, I still hate you. Reviewer 2 is an idiot. I've hated reviewer, all that, and I hate transactions costs. And then it's the editor has to decide. And then sometimes they'll reject it, and you'll say, I can't believe this. These people are so stupid, and but that's what it is. But that's how you handle it. But you don't dodge it. You bring it out. You make it explicit, honor it, and then build it into the paper. That's how it goes. Yep.
I want to ask this question concerning the basis for acceptance or otherwise of a paper submitted. Now, I know that most papers are accepted based on the potential contribution they make to knowledge, which may be theoretical or maybe contextual. But there is this perception that context-specific contributions are not very important as far as acceptance of papers are concerned.
Right.
And now that we have you here, I want to have, from where you are coming from, your views on that.
Right.
That is the first issue.
Yep.
Now, the second issue has to do with the type of data and where data is coming from.
Yep.
There is also this perception that data from some part of the world are not reliable. And for that matter, reviewers or editors may not be comfortable accepting papers from those parts of the world.
Right.
And I want to find out that indeed, from your experience, is this actually the case? That where people have the view that data from this part of the world are not reliable, and so irrespective of the contribution the paper stands to make, they ignore that and probably reject the paper.
Okay.
Is this perception also the case?
That's great.
So these are the two key issues.
Fantastic.
And the last issue, of course, is that...
I'm not that smart. Okay, I got that. No, I get it. No, theory versus, the first one was theoretical context versus theory. The second one is bias around the source of the data, of the reliability. And the third one is, I can do this, go.
The third one has to do with the fact that for some journals, there's a perception that it's a club, and for you to get penetrated into that journal, to have your paper published, you need to somehow be part of that club.
Got it.
So is it also the case that people look at the fact that this is your association as a basis of acceptance of paper, or they really look at the contribution your paper stands to make? Thank you very much, Prof.
Okay. I sat down because those are all big questions. Okay, here we go. There's a lot to be said about this. I'll try not to be boring. Okay, the first question is really interesting, and let me get what's behind that. So that question was, all these people like this highfalutin theory and theory. Everybody talks about theory, and then there's context. Now, back to the beginning. Why do we want to be a professor? I like the life of the mind, and I want to make a contribution to policy, to practice, to the people of Africa, et cetera. Context. So in some ways it becomes a theory practice issue, but even within the world of theory, it becomes a situation about differences, that motivation in Africa is different than motivation in Chicago, and then it's that idea of it's difference in degree or difference in kind. Difference in kind is it's fundamentally different. Difference in degree, there's a continuum, and it's just on the same. It's the same, but they're just so there's those questions are all mixed in with your orientation. And there's a third one, and this is maybe the most important one to think about. The journals that are generally at the top of most of all, I'll say all fields. I'll just go out on a limb. The top journals, the top global journals, are generally theoretical or oriented journals, because what they are, and this gets to the kind and difference, they're straining to find principles that transcend context. They're trying to find, and they've got there's an epistemology behind it, that there's some truth, there's some transcendent truth, and they're trying to understand what's the nature of behavioral decision theory, and is there anchoring, does the anchoring effect, or availability heuristics, or representativeness heuristics, do they operate the same in the jungles of Peru as they do in the streets of New York or Johannesburg, and they're looking for principles of the human condition. And so what you're trying to do is get theoretical ideas that cut across context. So that's what they're straining for, because otherwise you have a theory of the particular. And so now, then it gets tricky. There's something called middle range theory, which is a theory of the particular, or a theory of a phenomenon, and there's room for that too. And then if you look at the literature, there are just as many papers on. Oh, here's a good. Okay, I'm just making this up as I go. You could have a transactions cost paper, fine, and then you'll have some notions of the firm, and when you'll have alliances or make-buy decisions. A make-buy decision in transactions cost, for example. And then there may be a hybrid of an alliance of some sort. Okay, and you can analyze an alliance through the lens of what do we know about transactions costs. Full stop. Theoretical question transcends time space. There's also there's a lot of interest in Chinese investment in Africa. And you got 1.2 billion people that live in Africa, and you got a lot of Chinese people floating around investing in Africa. And you got a lot of countries for a variety of reasons with the colonial past and everything else, and the tribal, there's all kinds of need for outside capital. China's there, and then there's the geopolitics and all that. So if you're in Africa, if you're in China, if you're in the world and you want access to the African market, and you can read the McKinsey studies about this, you're about to get you've had your colonial experience. The world's going to come to your door yet again in the next 15 years. I hope you know that. I mean, all the people in the West are saying, this is the next great market. This is where, get ready. It's coming again. You know, God bless. We'll see how that goes. But there are people deeply interested in Chinese business in Africa. It could be Chinese-African joint ventures. And there will be a literature on African joint ventures, for example, because people care so deeply about that phenomenon. That's an instantiation of a theoretical question in transactions costs. Now, if you can find a theoretical question about transactions costs and with asset specificity or something to do with that, and in this context that's informed by Sino-African joint ventures, fantastic. Then you've got a theoretical paper situated in Africa, and then boom, you go. But you may also have a paper just about culture clash and how the Ashantis deal with the Chinese versus the Xhosa in South Africa deal with the Chinese, and there's something about Ashanti culture that is different than the Xhosa culture, and the Chinese do better with the Xhosa versus you can have a study like that, and you try to put that into a top journal, and they go, well, who cares? If you're Ashanti or you're Xhosa, you care deeply, and if you're Chinese, you care, but it doesn't speak to, unless you can make it be about something about culture, and then you say Ashanti and Xhosa cultures are representative of some other deeper question. So there's a sense of degree is that there are hot topics where people are interested in something, and then you will see a theory of a phenomenon, and it will gain attention. But in general, in those top global journals, they're looking for ideas that cut across time and context. But the nature of our work is exactly right back to the beginning. We're trying to make a better world, and we're working with ideas. And so you will find field journals that are related to certain topics or to specific regions. So I've had something to do with the creation with the Africa Academy, the Academy of Management Journal. Out of the Africa Academy of Management, and that's a field journal for work for Africa. There's a management organization review set up for work on China. That's where you would publish this stuff, and then you go full. So you put it in there, and then this is where, if you're the dean or the provost, and you look at this, and as you make sense of your career, you've got a communication strategy. Some of your things are practice oriented, and I'm interested in African industry and commerce, and I don't know, I'm working it out. Is this a difference in degree or kind? And it might inform a theoretical statement later on, but I got to understand this context. So I'm going to write context papers, but they probably will not go into those global omnibus journals because they care about theory. But there's plenty of room to publish those and build on them, and then people can build on those and say, oh, there's an idea here that informs theory, and then you go. So there's room for all of it. But sometimes it's just the mandate of the journals. They don't want that stuff in there because they privilege it for, they're trying to privilege it for all time, all space. And so you just, but where things get tricky is to the counting regimes, is that we privilege the top journals over the other journals. And if you're a context person and a phenomenon person and you're trying to change the world in Uganda, and you're trying to build small and medium-sized enterprises up in Uganda and service Uganda, and the big journals don't care about that per se, who's to say that work is no good? It's massively important. And then you could do that work in time, and then you may look at it and say, oh, as I look at this, this is actually different from what I see in the major journals. And guess what? There's a moderator there. And then you say, well, what's different? And then you'll have some signal through the noise of all these papers of what's going on in Uganda and say, well, this doesn't match what I'm seeing in England. And then maybe there's a study there, and then you'll go challenge that thing. But it'll come out over the lifespan. So that's, there's no correct answer there, but it feels like there is because those big journals are trying to find, they want to find transactions costs. They want papers about, anchoring and judgment biases and things that transcend. So there's that. The third one was the club. Everybody says that. When you get your paper rejected, you say, it's not because, well, all right, hold it. Psychology 1. Psychology 1. When something good happens to you, who's responsible? I am great. If something bad happens to me, who's responsible? These guys. When I look at, and then by the way, this is the perniciousness of this. When I look at her and say, something good happened to her, who's responsible? Maybe her, maybe she got lucky. We're kind of ambivalent. If something bad happens to her, who's responsible? She is. That's the just world hypothesis, because if you look at other people, if bad things happen to other people, and then acknowledge that there are forces in the world that destroy her, those safe for you. So, is success, responsibility for success, failure, you blame others. So when you get rejected in these journals, it's a club. And then it could be a club, but that's back to the context. Some of these, they want certain kinds of work, and they'll say it's a club. We're looking for this. We want Derrida and Foucault. We don't want positive scientists, so something like that. But there are times, there was an issue in ASQ back when I was a doctoral student. I remember it was the green. They put pictures on the cover. It was the green issue. Every single paper published in that issue of ASQ seemed to be a friend of the editor. And then that ran through the doctoral student world of saying, look at this, it's a club. But knowing editors, I said this yesterday too, and it's hard to believe when I first encountered an editor. Editors worry about white space. They're panicked that they won't have a paper to publish because papers get rejected all the time, and they want to publish papers. They're really worried about it. But if you're an author, talk to me. I've got papers. So I haven't seen that. People are trying real hard. But what I have seen, and this is what gives you pause, and I shared this yesterday too, is reviewers generally are looking to reject papers. They're looking to find the fatal flaw in the problems, and they identify them. They take that as that's their mission, rather than to say what's good about a paper. I said yesterday that it took 5 or 6 years to find any assistant professor, or the equivalent of a lecturer or a senior lecturer, that ever recommended acceptance of a paper at a journal. It's always the full professors and the tenured people will say yes, publish. Typically junior people say always reject everything. And in part, they find these flaws, and in part, getting their papers rejected. So if my papers are rejected, I'm going to reject these papers. But if you're an editor, you know that. And when I first did it, the one guy, a senior guy, strategy, told me, always get a young person who knows the literature cold, who has memorized has that Excel spreadsheet, knows all the methods and all, and then get a senior person as needed. But make sure you're in a junior, you'll get the senior looking to accept. The editors are looking to accept. Your reflex is to do it. But now there are so many associate editors. There's so many papers going in. There's loads of associate editors that are starting to be an editor. And I remember I was in my 4th year as an associate editor, and I had switched journals. And the senior editor of the second journal, I was associate editor for 3 years in one journal, and I was starting in another journal. And the editor took me aside and says, Jim, you need to learn how to accept papers. And I said, well, huff, I know how to accept papers. I've accepted a paper. But it stayed with me. Moment to me is I was still looking at it sort of as a reviewer. I'm finding flaws and flaws and flaws. And if there's anything left, yeah, maybe I guess I'll publish it. But as I got more senior at this, I'm trying to find a reason to accept it in light of the flaws. And so that's another part of this, is you get people that are new, that they've been good reviewers for all this time. Then they get to be an associate editor, and they're learning how to be an editor. And if you get them early in their career, they tend to reject more papers than not. And so that's just part of what it is. And so that's back to the attribution theory as to why was my paper rejected. The associate editor didn't know what she was doing or he was doing. And there may be some truth to that. But it's sort of what it is. I've found people are trying their best in terms of the club and stuff. I can't remember the second one. It was... Oh, the source of data. Yeah. Oh, that's so the issue there that's in the air. And I'll just, again, this is in, I don't know what it is in accounting or, well, yeah, okay, it could be the same there too. The worries that are out there is China. That's the undercurrent you hear, is that, and you hear it, I don't know if it's fair or not, is who's filling out these surveys, who's doing, what's the controls. But you could have that same concern anywhere, frankly, as to what's going on, and there is the misconduct and all of that. There is a reliance on the integrity of the scientist to do this properly. People look very closely to make sure that they want to know where the data came from and who did it, and how this all worked. Journals are now asking to see the data and stuff, but there is kind of a level of trust. But I've never heard of anyone saying, "Oh, the data come from China. We're not going to publish this." You'll see loads of papers, and people actually want to know. I mean, it's a gigantic economy; they want to know what's going on in China. But there's that thought. And I've never said, it's out there, and people say, "Oh, do I have to worry about this?" And then they stop because they don't know. And data coming out of the United States or Belgium or here or anywhere, it could be corrupt, or it could be. So you try to be raised with the right values, and then. But no, it's not that. But you can. It's back to this to say, well, they hate Uganda and they hate Africa, and come to think of it, I hate the Belgians too, and then you're off and running. But people are trying. The people that spend their time doing this and that are editors, it's a lot of work, and they do it because they love the field, and at least in my experience, they're trying as best they can. It's hard, but.
Sorry. I was thinking you should have a quick break for 15 minutes.
Oh,
and then come and continue.
We've been going for 3 hours, but again, I'm an enthusiast. I can just keep going because I'm leaving. I'm leaving tomorrow. This is my only chance to But yeah, if you want to go to the bathroom, you can go to the bathroom.
So there's a coffee, tea at the back there, and some snack. So just for about 15 minutes.
Okay. Hey, by the way, as you go, I am very aware that I've been blabbing on here. Very seriously, from my heart, thank you for all your attention. Seriously.